On this episode of the Minutemen Initiative, we are going to be talking about hearts and minds, specifically political hearts and minds. Politics is an important thing. It's a big part of our life. And we're going to be talking today about how you can be better with civil discourse and the importance of civil discourse and actually having conversations with people and getting outside of your echo chamber and getting involved with others that might not share the same ideas as you and talking through problems with them and coming up with solutions together. It's a very important aspect of who we are and what we do, and it needs to be done more. So we're going to focus a lot on that today. And to help us with this conversation, we have Michael Madrell of Soldotna Ammo joining us. So we're very thankful for him and his time to come and sit down with us and just have a really good discussion. It's a pretty loose and fancy-free episode, and we just have some really good conversations in it, and we hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. So, first of all, I want to welcome to the podcast Michael Madrell from Soldotna Ammo. How's it going, man?
It's going good. I'm lacking on coffee. But I do want to point out for everybody who can't see me, I'm dressed in a nice three-piece suit with 3 monocules, and I'm precisely groomed, like immaculate. What's the word I'm looking for?
Immaculate?
That's the word. Yeah. Beard. It's not short at all. It's like down to my belly button.
It's very dapper.
It looks like a wizard.
Yeah.
And 3 monocles, because everybody knows, you're smarter for the number of monocles you have.
Yeah.
So
I can confirm that this is all true. It actually made us redress or go back to our wardrobe and make some different decisions, but we still can't compete. So but thanks for joining today. I think we got a good must, or I guess a needed topic to talk about. I think it's something that, especially nowadays, is something that we need to be better about, especially I think as not just as, our side of the argument, if you will, but just as a community as a whole. And that is just being willing and able to talk to people, have conversations, and get to the bottom of things, and have mutual respect for one another, and kind of get out of that, proverbial echo chamber that we all get caught in sometimes. So, Michael and I actually last Saturday had the opportunity to go to the March for Our Lives protest that took place. It was a nationwide kind of protest that took place on June 11th. And there was one here in Soldotna. It was pretty small, but it was a group of people nonetheless that came out and thought it, believed in something enough to physically come out, build signs, and state their opinion kind of for the world to see right in front of Senator Dan Sullivan's office. So we actually went out there and got into some conversations with people, and I thought it went really well.
Yeah, I thought it was great just to be able to sit there and talk to people. It was great when they were responsive to that.
Yeah.
But, it's one thing to say, we're going there, we want to engage with people on the other side, but it's sad when you see people who are holding up signs like, I think this, and then you're like, let's talk about that. And I'm like, no, I don't want to talk to you. And so there was, I still think about 50-50 though. I think about half the conversations in total were still worth having.
Yeah.
And still great. But
I think that kind of comes down to, like, not always, obviously, like, you can have the same approach with, obviously you guys probably had the same approach with everyone you came out on, and it sounds like about 50% roughly was, they wanted to talk and actually they would discuss things with you guys. But some people just approach those situations just wrongly, you got to do it in a more, caring way. So that way, so they know, like, you're not just trying to, oh yeah, your opinion is stupid.
Yeah, I don't ever try to have those conversations with people with the intention of, like, I'm smarter than you and this is why. Half the time people ask me why I want to talk to them, and the thing I said is, we have something in common right now. We both want to prevent children from dying in schools. Mm-hmm. I want to hear your opinion. I want to go over it step by step. And there, of course, I was I was prepared with the common things that people brought up. So I was going to bring up why I didn't think those work, but I was willing to listen to them first before I tried to bring up anything from my end.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we're going to get into today, is talking about the importance of that, which I think was clearly put on display, at least for me, like being out there talking to, literally the polar opposite for the most part of what I believe. But we did have that core common ground of we need to do something to protect our children in schools.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool that we, and you hear it a lot. You hear people say, well, we need to find common ground. And it's like, so that was common ground, and, very different ways to solve that issue, or different opinions on how to solve that issue. But I think we made a lot of good points they hadn't thought of or just didn't understand. There was a lot of ignorance, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, just, just purely things they didn't know, things they just didn't understand that we brought up. And then we were able to hear from them. I think a lot of it from their perspective came from kind of a place of just not knowing and making assumptions, but being really passionate and caring about making a change.
Yeah.
And, I think we live in a, dare I say, civil society.
Yeah.
And here, I think if you're just a normal person that has, you haven't gone through, well, and I don't want to say you haven't gone through hardships, but you've lived in a first world society your whole life. Like, the answer to problems is laws.
Yeah.
Safety laws, that kind of thing. So I think just because you approach it from that perspective doesn't mean you are some terrible person. It's just a different idea on how to solve issues.
Yeah, I want to spin off there a little bit on the laws thing, because the whole idea of laws was that, you had representatives that you voted for in your community, and they went out and they fought on laws for your behalf. So there's supposed to be this idea that, what laws we had in place was put in place by us, by our community. I think we've stepped away from that a little bit now, but still, I think the right way to go is to build that, that trust back up. But I think what the problem now is we have people who see laws and are like, well, that doesn't represent me, so I'm just going to ignore it. How many people live in states where they're breaking laws that are only laws in that state? They could go across state border, it'd be fine, but they just don't want to live in that culture because they have a opinion about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I always, the one thing I kept bringing up too is that stronger communities don't have these issues. The biggest thing we face here in terms of gun deaths is still suicide.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of programs that come up and try to help solve that. Of course, there's a lot of suicide in the in the villages, and there's a lot of suicide in the veterans community, and those are both always challenges, and then they have to be dealt with in those communities. It's hard to not not have anybody in the military in your family or anything, and you go up to a guy, you're like, well, just get better.
Right.
And you can't, it's hard to go to a village and be like, well, where I'm from in this big city, we don't do this. So why can't you just not?
Right.
Yeah. You almost need help within that community in order for it to have any sort of, leg to stand on. Mm-hmm. Otherwise it's like, oh yeah, well, you've gone through different life experiences, so you don't know what I've been through. You know? So I feel like in order for, that's a whole different topic in itself, preventing suicide and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. I mean, you're exactly right as far as like gun violence, and especially in Alaska, like it is pretty much suicides. Like there's not a ton of people getting shot and murdered.
They try to bring that up at the event. It's like Alaska's actually, one of the worst. Like and you can find lists where Alaska's like top.
Yeah, like
list.
The per capita lists and stuff.
I think it's 24 point something percent, or 24.5 people every 10,000 or whatever, which is like just a little bit higher than the next few states when you do it by state. But that's gun deaths, not gun violence. If you look up gun violence by city, is my hometown is still like number 5, number 6, depending on what year you look at it, in Kansas City, Missouri there. And that's less suicide there. There's still a lot of suicide, but that's a lot of that actually is, just gun violence, which is again tied more to crime than it is like moments of passion. We always sensationalize these mass shootings, and I don't want to get sidetracked by this because we already know this stuff, but we sensationalize these mass shootings, but that represents a very small fraction of the people who actually die in these violent gun crimes.
Oh yeah,
children are being shot every day in high schools and stuff like that from just people with handguns. illegally owned handguns, that we already have laws in place that would have prevented that from happening. When it gets to a part, we need people to acknowledge the laws, and they're choosing not to. And you can pile those up on somebody as much as you want. I wish I could remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but when the Onion concert shooting happened in California, that shooter broke, I think, 7 different laws in total. It was, crossing a state line with a firearm, with intent to crime, high capacity magazine, a model that was banned. He couldn't legally own it. He went to the Onion concert, which was a gun-free zone. And of course, they actually have a law in California that says you can't shoot at people, I guess.
Whoa.
Yeah, it turns out. So it was just piling up and up and up. And somebody brought up, he already broke 7 laws that in place for this. And one of the politicians responded, well, we need an 8th, or maybe it was 6, and then we need a 7th. I can't remember. But
clearly, that person wasn't going to stop, regardless what laws you put on the table. Like that. When someone, and I feel like we're kind of preaching to the choir as far as our audience, but obviously, if you're going to break the law, you're just going to break the law. You don't really care. So
the one thing that, in terms of there's so many of these things we can go over that we go over all the time in these communities. The one things I think about all the time that we need to start talking about, and we was talking about it, we do need to have these conversations with ourselves about how better to have conversations with out of our group.
Yeah.
And when I was there at that event, I'm trying to have this conversation with somebody, and we disagree on this fundamental part of firearm ownership. I'm trying to have this conversation, and it's going well. And then a guy in a big truck comes by, rolls black smoke, flips him off, says, "I love the NRA." That does nothing to help that conversation.
I love the NRA.
yeah. Which that happened when I went to the other side in front of Sedona Creek Park there. That's what people were doing. It made that side, it made them feel better about their position. That they were being opposed. They fed off that more than people who are honking in support of them. And then the same thing too, if you're out there holding up signs with your friends who all agree with you, and those signs have phrases they disagree with, who are you holding up those signs for? So I do agree with, freedom of speech and going out there and holding up signs for what you believe in. But what's on them can't just be I'm right, you're wrong. It needs to be, you need to try to win people over, because otherwise we're just going to keep butting heads.
And kind of on the opposite side of that, and you may be saying this and I might just be misunderstanding you, but the person who's coming up, rolling coal, flipping them off, giving them the bird, isn't they're not putting up a good fight for their beliefs either. That's just basically we're going to disagree and we're not even going to talk about it. That's, you've already made that decision. And I think that's the topic that's good for our audience, because most of our audience obviously is in support of the Second Amendment and kind of the same beliefs that we all three have. But giving them, obviously you need to research this information, otherwise you don't have good talking points when you do these things.
A little fact sheet.
Definitely research before you just go into this. And constantly be learning, but also be willing to all right, I'm just going to go out there and have a friendly conversation, because it sounded like I was unfortunately not able to go, but it sounds like there was a little bit of some people actually that actually makes sense.
You got somebody to change their sign, right?
Yeah, somebody. It was over so basically they had a sign, and this the moral superior of the group came up. And the specific woman I was speaking with, she was very nice, but she definitely approached our conversation from a position of, you must be, I'm here to educate you. Which was fine, And but she said, okay, well, I've been hearing you talk, and I want to know, that's fine. I hear what you're saying, and she kind of threw in some things and you're wrong, but here, let's do this. She was like, look at the sign. Let's find common ground on this sign. And I said, okay, let's read through the sign. So it had universal background checks, increase the age from 18 to 21, red flag laws, which they kept calling red gun laws for some reason, but magazine capacity bans, and then 3-day cooling period. So there's, the pretty big bullet points that a lot of the anti-gun kind of conversation likes to throw out.
Regurgitation.
Yeah. So right off the bat, I said, all right, well, let's start with universal background checks. Said we already have them. And they were kind of like taken aback by that. I'm like, well, no, we don't. We have them in our state, but not federally. I was like, no, there's a federal background check. And we walked through all that. I actually had a 4473 with me, and which I believe that was your idea, which that was a great idea to bring
a lot of people
that.
just didn't understand that.
Yeah.
You already had to go through this list, and that database comprises. I think there's a lot of things that can be done better with that database, because it's not a perfect thing, but it's getting better, and it's gotten better and better a lot since all federal databases after 9/11, because they're trying to catch more people. I mean, that's the whole purpose of them. And I've seen people go through and get delayed, and I've seen people go through and get denied because of things on that list. Mm-hmm. So it does work. It does stop them from purchasing firearms from stores. But again, the thing I kept bringing up with them is, how do you prevent two guys from just selling a gun to each other?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you just make it illegal. I'm like, it is illegal in a lot of states. It's illegal to just do a private transfer. And they're like, well, how do we enforce it? I'm like, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, that was the big thing. They wanted to, or they ended up, after talking about that with them, they were blown away that it was already federal. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, no, it's FBI. Like, it's the NICS. I explained how NICS works, and walked them all the way through the form, and they said, oh, okay, we'll take, Susan or whoever it was, like, mm-hmm. take that off the sign. Let's change that, which I thought was kind of cool. And we didn't get into the fact that I don't agree with background checks at all, but
it is a whole, and like, I'll have these points, people, anytime I can. I try to bring up that I don't personally agree with this thing, but this thing is in place.
Right.
And one of the reasons I don't personally agree with it is because we still do see crime.
Yeah.
It's something that's put in there to hinder some people. Because like I've made the argument before on the making handguns 21. The whole reason that came up is because there was a alarming number of gun deaths that was happening from people in between the ages of 18 and 21. So mm-hmm. let's just bump it up to 21, and we saw a decrease in that. But what else did we lose in that? We only ever look at positive numbers. If something's a 0, we don't count it.
Right.
And so we don't, and that's the whole problem with people who save themselves with guns. Somebody who pulled out a gun and nobody died, nobody cares. Like, the story just doesn't.
Yeah, it never becomes a statistic.
Yeah. And it's hard to
especially with
that.
our news outlets, because they don't want to promote that.
Yeah.
So, you're just never going to see it. I mean, we were talking about that in our, was it the school shooting podcast that we were talking about with Andrew?
Yeah.
Where we were talking about there was a potential mass shooting that was prevented because someone
mm-hmm.
had a firearm that was there at a party, and it was stopped before it ever became anything. And it was like hard to find that story.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you had to like dig to find it. So
yeah, we sat here, like when we were prepping for the podcast, it took me a good 15 minutes, like straight, just searching for like solid 10 to 15 minutes, finding an article, reading through, no, that's not it.
Yeah.
Checking the dates on when the article was posted, and it's all like from like years ago. And it's like, and then finally I found it. But, I mean, and the media plays a big role into, I think, a lot of things, and actually kind of jumping from that, what do you think are the biggest things that cause division and polarization? Because these two, I think understanding that is important, because that's a barrier to having these conversations we're able to go have. Because just walking up on the scene, you could see the the atmosphere at first. When we first walked up. They knew what side we were on, like right out the gate. They were like, okay,
the
here they
deuce and a
come.
half was a dead giveaway.
Yeah, I think the deuce and a half was. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't have driven up in it, but I think at the same time it was good.
That helped bring up the patriot stuff, though. People asking.
That's true.
They feel like they are patriotic, and I'm not going to argue what somebody defines as patriotic.
Yeah.
I think one of the, again, I'm horrible at remembering the names of people I try to paraphrase, because I'm not going to get a quote right. But what was it? Patriotism is whoever waves the flag the hardest and yells the loudest. Everybody has a different opinion of what that means. Yeah. So I know that gets back into the whole, what's a woman thing, though. Yeah. It's like it's hard to define a thing if you have 20 different groups making their own definitions for it.
Right.
That's a whole other, man, you could do a whole thing on that too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But yeah, just us walking up, they were very defensive out the gate, which rightfully so. I mean,
Yeah.
and we were very careful not to like come up like we were trying to muscle them out or like, yell at them or anything. And I introduced myself, but they were very early on, like, who are you? I was like, oh, my name's Jacob. Like, well, who are you with? And, kind of like, they're kind of all like huddled together. Like, let's band together. And then once we simply said, we're just out here to ask you, what you believe, why you thought it was so important to come out in person today in front of Dan Sullivan's office. Like, tell us what you'd like to see changed.
Yeah.
And once we approached it in that open manner, it turned into, so then they came over and started telling us.
Yeah.
So
I almost wish we could have
These
said
beards don't bite.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing. People always assume, people make a lot of assumptions about the other side. So that one thing that I was able to bring up. So somebody's like, well, who are you to bring up, these things? I was like, well, I sell guns like, pretty much daily. And I've been involved in a number of FFLs now and I've helped other people set up their FFLs. And, we've done, I've done a lot of stuff in this field. I've been to SHOT Show a few times, even though I don't like going there. So I've seen a lot of this, and I've seen a lot of this stuff on the law enforcement side. One thing is that I actually like just my own thing and throwing it out there. I grew up in a very, different area. So I had a lot of prejudice on law enforcement for a long time growing up because that's who I saw causing violence, it's perception really matters. And when I got here in Alaska and I started, working more with FFLs and I got to see law enforcement as more what they're supposed to be, I definitely have a much higher respect for law enforcement here in Alaska than I did. But that happens, I don't want to get sidetracked again. That happens a lot in big cities because their budget keeps getting cut. So instead of you seeing 2 cop cars go out to something that's a potentially violent situation, it's 1 cop and his backup's, 30 minutes away.
Right.
And he's out there and he looks like a, Darth Vader. He's got a massive vest on and hundreds of rounds of ammo because he doesn't know what he's coming into. So then he overshoots and he kicks down that door and he roughs somebody up because if he doesn't, he's not going home to his wife.
It's almost like the shock and awe. He's going in with shock and awe because he's like, well, I don't have any support, so I got to go in full force. I'm not gonna hold back a punch. Not like he's actually punching. Right. Well, he may be punching, but like I'm not gonna hold it back because I don't want to get jumped or something. I'm gonna go in full force to get this threat out of the way and subdued and ready to rock and roll with my job. And I think, that's going back to previous podcasts where we've talked about defunding the police is not the right answer because ultimately it's creating more violence from the police by doing that because for one, they're not getting the training, for two, they're not getting the backup. It's just 100%. It's a domino effect.
Because that's what anytime you look up the police brutality, which for sure it does happen, but it happens in a lot of these big cities where that they eventually get pushed in that corner. Same thing as crime. Crime happens in a place where people are left with less and less options, so they go out and they try to do something about it. And those situations can turn people into something they would have never been. I don't want to name drop this particular officer, but there's an officer here locally. We talk about that stuff all the time, and he acknowledges how easy it is even here. If cops are put on a slippery slope if they're in a spot. And just like anybody who's carrying a gun, you don't want to go shoot somebody, but if you're put in a situation, you want to go home to your family. So, eventually that decision's made. And I don't want to ever encourage violence. I think that, far more can be done to prevent a lot of this by just being involved in as many community programs as possible. But at the end of the day, if you're in a situation, you can't say like, well, I'm going to let this happen. And then I wouldn't have killed this guy.
Yeah.
But then that guy might kill the next person. You're letting that violence continue by not defending yourself. And it's one of those things, like if you put up a wall, if you say like this, or not a wall, like a line, like I'm not going to be a victim, here's my line. Mm-hmm. You're not just saying I'm not a victim. You're telling the opposition, that this community won't be a victim. You're going to run into people like this who aren't going to take what you're putting out there.
Right.
And again, I'm not trying to like, don't go out there and just, go punish her or anything, but because I think the better solutions is still community involvement in a lot of this. It's sad, but that's where it's going.
No, I agree. I mean, that's a huge that's a big part of kind of what we end up talking about a lot too is, community involvement, and you specifically being involved in your community. And, it starts with you. That's like, I think Jordan Peterson always says, you gotta clean your room before you change the world.
Yeah.
That's paraphrasing. I don't know what the actual quote is, but basically the whole point is like, you need to look at yourself and make yourself the person you want to be before going out and, tackling a global topic,
And that was something that I came up with, like, having conversations in middle school. We were talking about, what was the big topic in middle school? Like, let's see, Monica Lewinsky was happening around then. That was a big thing. But when we eventually got into these world topics, like, how can we go out and help the world? And I was like, well, it's like, we got homeless people that I walk past on my way walking to school. Like, we got, junkies, and we have drug dealers, and we have like rapists out, and people know who these people are, and they're doing nothing about it. It's like, you guys want to try to find a solution for what's happening in another continent, and we have problems right here. So then I think I was like 14 the first time I said it. It's like, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your family. If you can't take care of your family, you can't take care of your neighborhood. If you can't take care of your neighborhood, like, why are you trying to move on to the next thing?
Yeah.
And there's definitely, I'm not saying I wouldn't try to do something to help somewhere else, but most of what we can do like that, like, there's a shoe company I buy from that's veteran owned that gives money to educating women in Afghanistan, or they used to. I don't know how that works anymore.
Yeah.
I like those shoes. I like the idea.
Yep.
I've met people who've escaped from Afghanistan, who left before the war on terror started, and I met people who lived in Afghanistan during that, and a lot of them, again, not supporting, like, war, but that was a safer region for a time period.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to help those people, because it's great to help people wherever you can, but buying a pair of shoes to give $5 to, some 14-year-old girl to learn how to read, which is great, but there's so many things we can do in our own community, and those aren't usually money involved. We don't need to go donate $10,000 to the food bank, which would help, but you can grow vegetables and bring that stuff.
Yeah.
There's so many things you can do that just your time and you meeting people and making those bonds too help communities. They keep people from falling off that slippery slope, because it's everybody is facing something out there.
Yeah. And I think, just going back to our experience that we had this last Saturday, that was in my opinion, a pretty beautiful example of a community effort. It was inadvertent, like, it was unintentional, but I guess it might have been more intentional on our end.
Yeah.
But the fact that, I think when I was talking to, I can't remember who it was, someone came in to the shop, because I think we posted on our story, hey, we're going to go do this on Saturday, come join us if you want. And I had some people come in I think it was on Friday, and say, like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you wasting your time?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you got to remember that these are people that live here. These are people that live in our community, and they feel this way in our community. So let's go talk to them. These are neighbors. These are people, especially here. This is such a small community. Like, it's a small town. Like, while we're there, we had people pull up that were like, oh, hey, it's Michael, So it's like, I mean, it's a super small community. And I think it's important. I think it's important to go and hear, pay them the respect of, like, tell me what you would do. Tell me what you would change. And then they gave us, in most cases, the mutual respect of hearing us out, but kind of going back to, like, that division, what do you think perspective, you brought up perspective and context, do you think that's a big fueler of what causes the division and polarization we see today?
Yeah, I think we were talking about this. What's that? The Log Cabin Republicans are like a great example. They're a group. I won't name them exactly, but there's a lot of these groups that they feel they agree with one side or the other based on one topic. So then, based on that, they get wrapped into everybody else's topics, and that's Republicans and Democrats and Libertarians even, like, try to stick with the viewpoints of the Libertarians they follow. So it's like people get stuck in these sides, and sometimes I think they don't form their own opinion. They agree with this guy on this, so then he's saying this, and they're like, well, he's probably right about that. And I've always thought that was a trap. You can get wrapped up.
Yeah.
I like Ron Paul a lot. There's still things I disagree with him, on. can't remember what right now, but
Yeah.
you can't get stuck on that side because, this protest, one of the things we do see pretty often, is we at the Planned Parenthood, we see people protest on both sides of that all the time, against it or for it, and that's a lot of the same topics. People just need to sit down and have a conversation. Now, there are some extremists on both sides who don't want to even engage, so they're only there to show their other friends who are already on that fringe, like, I'm here to hate on this group. But the abortion thing, abortion can be solved through education. I feel like gun crime can be solved through education. I feel like drug use can be brought down through education, and we've seen that, and not stuff necessarily like DARE or anything. I know that's had a weird track record, but with abortion, people get stuck up on there because people are either in the idea like, this is my body, you can't tell me what to do with it, or this is a baby's body and somebody needs to stand up for it. So it's hard to find that common ground
right
in that group. But I've sat down with people on completely different sides of that and had a conversation with them. And sometimes it's easier to do when you get people out of those groups. If they're standing there in that line, then they're just they're toting that line. They're gonna carry that message.
Yeah, they're out on the front line, ready for war.
Yeah,
and they've already put up all their defense, and they're like, no, I'm not. They've already made up their mind, kind of how the day is gonna go at that point. I feel like, but I think you still can approach it if you do it correctly, and obviously it's very dependent on the person. Like you said, there's extremists on either side, but definitely perspective. Like whether that's you kind of mentioned, depending on where you grew up, obviously is gonna kind of form your perspective. Whatever side you vote with, or maybe you're libertarian, you kind of right in the middle, obviously that's going to change your perspective because of the news outlets you're going to be listening to, because, if you Fox versus,
CNN,
pretty much every other, like they're pretty much all, liberal medias other than, there's a couple conservative media stations as well, but I mean, like, but it's like they're kind of it's going back to the echo chamber. It's like the same information just getting regurgitated from a different portion, like different viewpoint, I guess.
Yeah.
But and then you're not even considering. I'm not saying that you should look at some of their viewpoints and like, oh yeah, but you can at least like kind of like, okay, I can see where they're trying to argue this, and then that gives you the ability to like have a a counter to that, or at least research it, like, hey, let me check this out because maybe I am wrong about this. So
yeah, because they've done their own research. Ideally, they've come up there. I do think that gets into the whole issue though of how, because if you type in anything on Google, you'll find something to prove that.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know if you guys knew this, but the Earth's flat. And hollow, and and a simulation.
And birds are drones.
Yeah. So you can always find something to prove your point. And I wish there was better journalism. It's so hard to find people who actually go through those statistics deep enough to find, the truth in it. But the problem is, you have people claiming the same thing on both sides, that they've gone through all the data and this is the conclusion they came up with. So even then it becomes then, who do you trust? And I think a lot of times, not that people are meaning to mislead people, but they hold that feeling that this is what's right. So all of their research, subconsciously or maybe with malicious intent, goes to verify that fact, and they focus more on that. And I'm not sure what you can do to shake that of it. I've tried to say this before, like let's start over. Let's say there is no statistics to look up. Like we can't use our phones, we can't Google anything. So we have 100 people and just do that thought experiment. Guns are a thing. Like 25% of people, and not even 25% of people, let's say like 5% of people are using guns to get what they want from other people. And there's another 5 or 10% of people that want to use guns to defend against those people. And then there's another 10% that says like, well, we got to disarm those bad guys. So how do we do this? If you look at it in a smaller group, it becomes a more personal experience. And if you think about the smaller numbers, so boil it down to 10. So if you have like a family of 10 people, you got one cousin who just whatever shows up to every family event and just beats the hell out of everybody and then shoots like 3 cousins. But you got 5 cousins who are there who are like, it's like, I want to keep Carl from keeping to do this. It's like, I think I'm gonna hold a gun and deter it against him. And then your Aunt May is like, no, don't do that. Which is crazy to think about a small thing, because if you're actively being attacked you want to defend yourself.
Yeah.
People just look at it. They look at these externally. I've had guns pointed at me before, and you know, I'm still here. I'm not dead, but you know, I also didn't stop these guys from getting any money. You know, they're just going to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And you know, being at the other end of that, like being a victim of a crime, is one of the things that led me to wanting to have a gun for self-defense. Knowing people who have been, you know, raped at gunpoint led me to want to encourage others to take classes and own guns. I know there's people that were there that are victims in some class. You know, there's something that they've suffered, but they don't make that same connection. And you can see people live through the same experiences and come out of it completely different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and yeah, I'm not sure what can be done to unify that, but I definitely think the peaceful conversation is going to get far further.
Oh, yeah.
Is that far further? Is that the right?
Far further.
Far further.
It works.
Yeah.
That checks out.
Yeah. Actual factual facts there.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I really like what you brought up about liking someone for maybe one or two ideologies that they have, or you shared ideology, and then you start to just say, well, they're right on a bunch of other points, you know, things that maybe you haven't come to your own conclusion on. And I think starting right there, you know, because again, going back to like, you got to clean your room before you can.
Yeah.
So and this kind of goes back to the whole purpose of why we wanted to do this podcast, which is, I think our community, I guess our community, the more gun-friendly community, or however you want to word it, need to be better at this. And we are very guilty of it. I think it's, we saw it with President Trump. Mm-hmm. You know, you had people that bowed down to him and treated him like he was like, revolutionary. And and you know what? He did a lot of good things, but he did a lot of bad things too. Yeah. And, you know, we've gotten flack in the past for speaking out against, actually back while he was president, our older version of the podcast, we had a full episode talking about how he was making a lot of anti-gun decisions. And, you know, people on our side either conveniently ignore or forget about that, or don't even know because they're so blinded by what good they're saying he's doing.
They're focusing on those things that they see as the big pictures, and then they're letting these other things slide by.
Yeah, and he did
great things, but he also did terrible things.
Yeah.
Like for the gun community, he did mostly bad things, honestly. Yeah. Like there wasn't really many things we gained in his 4-year, term.
Yeah. He heard gun freedom's worse than President Obama did.
Yeah. And mostly because, like they say, if you have a conservative president and you let your guard down because you're like, oh, well, he's got the same beliefs as me, so I'm not going to you stop paying attention, I think, a little bit more, even though the president's not the one that's making all those decisions anyway, or at least shouldn't be. So
no, we definitely got to get more involved and I'm not as involved as I'd like to be, but more involved in local politics, because that affects our day-to-day life far more than who's president.
That's like that popularity contest every 4 years has way less impact on your life than those midterms do, and those city council member votes and stuff like that. Like that, those are things that, and it takes effort, and I think that's another thing that I wanted to get into for division. It's easier to just pick someone and be like, all right, you make the decisions. I'm just going to agree with everything. Yeah. And I think that happens a lot. And I truly believe that the best way to start breaking down this division is for us as a community to be better about looking more at ourselves and saying I need to be a critical thinker. I need to make my own decisions, and understanding that you don't need to agree with someone to the T. I end up voting for President Trump? Yes. Was he my first choice? No. Like when he was running with other, all the other people he was running with, there was other people that I wished would have made it, but obviously he did, and I was definitely going to vote for him over the other two idiots.
And we get stuck in that, lesser of two evils a lot. But then, we get stuck in that party line thing too. I heard a lot of my friends who are, more left-leaning often share memes of the vote blue, no matter who. Yeah. And it's like, well, really? Like, no matter who? Because I bring up Andrew Yang a lot, but a lot of Democrats don't actually watch Democratic debates. I figured out, so I watched that for nothing, I guess, my own entertainment. But Andrew Yang had he had a solid understanding of the economy compared to anybody. Well, definitely compared to Biden. Yeah, we wouldn't be in this situation if he had gotten the party nomination. he would have done a lot to cut government spending and help fix a lot of this. So there, in that category, in money, there was a candidate on the blue side that would have done better than this, but nobody was even pushing for him. People didn't even, like, a lot of Democrats didn't even watch those debates. It was just whoever they picked, and then it's like, well, that's who. So it's like I think they put those debates on just for Republicans to have talking points. Because the same thing too. Like, I don't know. I know a lot of Republicans who watch the Republican debates and the Democratic debates. I don't know Democrats who even watch. I don't know any Democrats who watch the Democratic debates.
Yeah,
and they definitely didn't watch the Republican debates because they just think all those guys are old white racist.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, and that that furthers the point of they're just going deeper into that echo chamber.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so I think it's really important to be able to be critical of people in authority, respectfully so, but it's okay. Again, it's okay to, if you really agree with someone on this one thing, it's like, that's great, but what about everything else? Like, you need to have your own beliefs and you need to have your own constitution. Like, be confident in what your ideas are, what you believe, and have the Constitution to stand up for it, because ultimately that's kind of what we did on Saturday.
Yeah.
We did it in a respectful manner. We let them talk and in turn allowed them to do the same. They had things they were very firm on, which is why they were out there to begin with. And then we had things we're firm on, which is why we came out and, peacefully confronted them. So yeah, I think that right there might be one of the biggest ways to start to cut down on this division, is being willing to hear someone else out, not being so concrete on this is it. Like, this guy, if this guy doesn't become president, then, he should enact martial law.
Yeah.
And like all this crazy, like, I mean, I don't want this to become a podcast about the election and all the weird voter fraud, because there definitely was voter fraud. But I mean, like, it's
banned now. You said the words.
I know. Yeah.
Missile strikes happening.
Warning. We're going to get the little tab on the podcast that says there's misinformation in here. And even let's go ahead and add the word COVID in there.
Just get
no, but even with that, even during COVID, you saw a lot of that kind of same stuff going on. It's like, you either are on this side, you either wear masks or you don't, and there was no never really any middle ground. And that, I think that is one of the most dangerous things that our society has kind of devolved into over the last 10 to 15 years, because it's been really recent, really, as far as the severity of the division. So I think, again, start with your room. If we're able to go at the local level, like, we didn't go to if we had gone to the March for Our Lives protest in Washington, because they did them all over the nation on June 11th. We probably wouldn't have got very much ground made. It would have been, oh, look at these crazy dudes from Alaska. Like, right. But no.
But if they had people that were from there,
exactly,
over there,
because they have the right context and the right perspective. They are from the community. They understand. Like, when we went there, a common theme that I noticed was all these people were gun owners.
Yeah. So a very surprising number.
Yeah. I didn't, as far as all the conversations I personally had, every one of them was sure at one point to be like, I mean, I own guns. Yeah. I have like 6 guns. And I was like, oh. And then they would quickly say, you have to here for bear and stuff. It's like, that's something unique to Alaska. Like, people are raised here and people live here with the understanding of, which is ironic, but it's like, so best defense against a bear is a gun. Okay, well, I better buy a gun, which I find is pretty funny, But,
and when I used to get into, not that this is worth anybody's time, but when I get into like arguments with people on the internet, or I also, even on the internet, I try to have discussions. I try not to just go to like, well, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I try to like go into facts, but there was a guy I kept running into in like 30 different groups, and he didn't have a profile picture. It was just Batman. And he kept saying that, like, he would bring up Batman all the time. It's like, Batman's anti-gun. I was like, Batman has a phobia of guns. Like, it's like a fear of it. It's not like Batman wouldn't know how to use a gun. And it's like, depending on, like, I didn't want to get into the whole, the Tim Burton Batmobile had like miniguns on it.
Yeah.
So
true.
That's a whatever. But we talk about these things, and I'd try not to bring up DC Comics as a source, but we'd be talking about guns. Oh, I just lost it. Where did that thought go? Anyway, so we'd be having this conversation, and I try to be nice to him. even though this guy was clearly a fake account, he wasn't being himself.
Yeah, Russian bot.
Yeah, here I am, like my face out there. I think anything worth doing is worth doing with your name on it. And I'm trying to have these conversations with him about guns and how they are in the community, even though we're not in the same community. But he got to the part where he's like, well, okay, so you're in Alaska. I understand guns. I'm like, well, statistically, you're more likely to get attacked by a person where you're at than I am to be attacked by a moose or a bear.
Yeah.
And people get attacked by moose and bears and live. You know, people get attacked by, not that people die every time they get in contact with you know, but like death is a very real possibility. There's one street in Kansas City, Missouri that I used to bike past several times a night when I was vandalizing. But it would that one street, it's something like 80 upper 80 lower 90% of death row inmates in Missouri are from this one street in Kansas City. So
wow.
if anything, I could run through the woods here far safer, you know, barefoot, unarmed, anywhere on the peninsula,
smelling like a
piece of meat.
Yeah. Then I was crossing that street, you know.
Right.
Let's put this to the test.
Yeah,
this is what we're doing after the podcast.
Yeah, we'll have it on to be on our Patreon.
Michael's just running through the woods naked, covered in meat.
You know, that's something I definitely would do just for the social experiment. I don't know about fully naked though. You know, I'm one of those never nudes. I'll get a Speedo or something.
Never nude. Hashtag never nude.
Yeah, hashtag never nude.
Hey man, you just said if it's worth doing, do it with your name on it. So.
I'll get a Speedo with my name on it.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, no, that's a good point though.
Yeah, so they're always quick to like, oh yeah, you should definitely have guns for wildlife, or you should. The military should definitely have guns. They're going to, or cops should have guns. Like I've had that argument. People are like, well, cops should have guns, but maybe not people. Like, who are the cops facing that you aren't? Like, cops are in response to the people you're already facing. And not that, you know, and I've never tried to say disarm the cops because I don't agree with disarming, you know, pretty much anybody. You know, of course, there's the whole mental illness thing, but again, that's still solved better on a community level.
100%.
I've gone to people's houses who told me they don't feel safe right now. I picked up their guns and I've held on to them for any amount of time that they need me to.
From per their request.
Yeah. And those people have not been institutionalized. There's no law that's even being recommended right now that would prevent these people from being in a house with firearms. What prevented them from being in a house with firearms was them reaching out to their community and saying, I don't feel safe with firearms in this house.
Yeah, and then in response, their community,
you don't get much closer, just a little bit.
Yeah.
In response, their community showing up and being willing to hear them out and you know, take those tools away.
Yeah,
so.
And I've held on. I think I had 6 guns one time for over 6 months, and it got to the part where I was like, maybe they just never want them back. And then, but it was a good feeling when they did ask for them back. They felt like they've gotten past that moment. They've seeked help, or that member of the household they're worried about, you know, moved out. So that they're in some of the cases where they're worried about, you know, violence and stuff like that. So it's, you know, if this would have been those red flag laws and they would have been deemed mentally unfit, in some of those cases they never owned a gun ever in their life, no matter what.
They're definitely not just going to be able to ask for them back.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Those red flag laws, I mean, if the fact that, and that was one of those issues that we talked about quite a bit out there, and that I couldn't quite seem to get them to look at it from a different perspective. It was always, you know, I brought up Title 47, for example. I was like, you know, well, we already have basically, you know, the same kind of thing, but well, you could probably explain it better, but
I don't know if
as far as I understand it, it's if someone's a danger to themselves or others, they can be brought into custody for a limited amount of time.
Well, it's more of a
and that this is an Alaska law, but
you're thinking more of like it's almost not even a Title 40. Like, I don't know if that falls under Title 47. That's more of like a mental health hold. So, like, if someone comes in on a Title 47, let's say you got someone that's homeless and gets belligerent or is under, you know, is intoxicated in one way or another, or and the law enforcement officer feels, okay, this person, they'll talk to him like, hey, is there somewhere I can drop you off, or someone that can take care of you? If they don't have anyone, then they can either drop you off at the hospital or within the prison system in Alaska. and then they get filed as a Title 47 non-criminal. So it's not actually like a criminal charge. You
Right.
don't have to go to court or anything like that on it. You get held, but if you get, for whatever reason, you have mental health issues or whatever, the mental health clinician can then do a mental health hold on that person until they can be seen by like an actual like API, which is like our mental health
Anchorage
institution.
Psychiatric Institute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it gets kind of weird. I mean, it's a little bit like, I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with it, but that's all right.
Yeah. No, and I didn't bring that up because I agree with it, but they hadn't even heard of those laws that we already have in place. And the perspective was always, well, why would you apprehend the person? Why not just take the guns away? And it's like, well, because, I mean, again, I don't agree with like scooping up a person, but.
And unfortunately, I think from what I've seen in those situations, a lot of law enforcement officers will just hit you with a charge, but it'll be like a misdemeanor charge, like a criminal mischief, and like the fifth, So something that's just like a ORable charge. But if you don't have, so that's owner cognizance, it kind of goes down a rabbit hole. But like if they're basically just hitting something with you, so they then have the right to cuff you up and bring you in to kind of remove you from the situation until things cool down.
Yeah, that's what they did. The Seward Police Department, when I was over there for the landslides, I was talking to an officer who, like, before they even had the roads cleared, there was a guy who was just trying to climb the landslide, and
what?
They had to go and they arrested him. They charged him with all sorts of things. They didn't actually pursue it. They let him go. It was just so that they had a justification to get him.
Kind of get him out of there.
Yeah. Because I don't know his full story. I don't know why he would. That landslide was terrifying. I wouldn't want to be. I didn't want to be in front of it. I didn't want to be to the side of it. I didn't want to be anywhere near it. There was big rocks coming down all the time. I can't imagine a guy early on before they were. Because I got there weeks after they had started clearing stuff, and it was still like, I don't want to be around here.
Yeah.
Was it continuous? Like, was it?
Oh yeah. Like every morning, especially when the sun would hit it. Get past the mountains on the other side, sand would move to start running like a river. I got like weird little videos.
Was that from the snow melt off? Then it was causing it to the ground to kind of erode.
No, there's this gets to the whole other thing too. There's like air pockets underneath it.
Oh,
so that's what like a lot of this causes. So like as the temperature changes, some of that heats up and pushes on the inside. So like sand would start running, which would make rocks fall loose, which would hit other rocks, which cause bigger ones to come down. We had while we were there, we had rocks come up onto the road out to Little Point that popped tires, but people would still we'd tell them yeah, rocks are flying down, and that some of those big rocks they had a wall built up, so big rocks would be fine. They'd get stopped by that. Every once in a while, big enough rocks would hit that would make you couldn't even see across it. It just kick up a whole bunch of tan dust. But those little rocks, they would come screaming down, and they'd hit those bigger rocks, and they'd fly off. So every once in a while, we'd hear a dink.
Did they have a detour route for the people on the backside of that, or were they just kind of stuck over there?
For 3 weeks, they had no road at all.
Were they boating in and out?
Yeah,
like
they had
supplies and stuff.
The city had a water taxi service they
okay
licensed with for 3 weeks.
Because I was about to say that kind of goes back to. I mean, that's a completely different topic, but I just want to bring it up since we're here. But like the avalanche that happened in Eagle River as well, like the people that are on the backside of what's that road? Is it Highland Mountain? That road. I think so, yeah. Anyways, that huge avalanche that came through and blocked off the road, everyone on the backside was kind of like separated, but like having stocked up food and stuff.
You gotta be prepared.
Yeah.
That's something too. I bring up all this stuff. One of the reasons I support firearms is the same reason I support, trying to stay a decent level of being fit, and the same reason I think, you should keep food at your house, and the same reason I think you should, try to have enough money to cover next month's rent. In case something happens, just anything you can do to be prepared for anything obviously makes you better prepared for it, and your chance of surviving it. I've seen people who live paycheck to paycheck, just one little thing, their car getting stolen, and poof, they lose their job because they can't get to work, and the whole thing just comes crumbling down.
Yeah.
And then they're selling feet pics on the internet or whatever.
Wait, you don't do that?
I'm just kidding. I got amazingly long toes that are creepily curly and hairy, and I get so much money off it.
Oh man, you got those unicorn feet.
Yeah,
that's good.
It's good for balance, though. You
got that OnlyFans foot account.
Only foot. Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah, I don't want to get again sidetracked on that. My I won't say who because it embarrassed her, but my ex-wife, no, I'm just, she made a comment about like I need to sell feet pics to get some money, and I was like, no, your feet are not ugly enough, and she's like, thank you. Like, like I was like, you gotta like to get really money off that, you gotta have some unique feet. Like your feet just look like Wikipedia stock photos of, of feet. It's like, no, you gotta have something crazy going on. You gotta be missing a toe.
Yeah, dude, feet fetishes is on another level, man. So getting back off the topic of feet, so
wrong foot.
Yeah, getting back on the right foot. Where were we? Man, that derailed me.
I know. That's good. I have a good skill for derailing.
So to kind of talk about division. I think going back kind of to re-summarize where we were headed. Being able to just have conversations with people is super important. So I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit because I think that we truly need more. We need to be able to have civil discourse with people.
Absolutely.
And discourse, if you're not familiar of it, is basically debate. It's conversation, but it's conversation that has two opposing views. So or conversation that's had with two different ideas on how to solve it or whatever it is. So that's what discourse refers to. But I think it's as simple as just discussion. Like a lot of people say debate or we're gonna have a debate. No, you're just gonna have a discussion.
Yeah, debate sounds intimidating for whatever reason. Like if I'm going in, like I remember that was like a school thing that you had to do, like in some English class.
You had a timer. You had to make your point. Yeah,
dude, I was freaked out because for one, I hated public speaking, and for two, it's like now I got to go up there and I got to try to win this battle with this person that's probably actually researched this, and I'm doing it last minute right now, like on the fly.
Yeah.
But I think just doing what we're doing right here. Obviously, we don't really have opposing views, but like same, it's chill. It should be. It shouldn't be anything that you're scared of, and it should be just something that's like, like you got to look at it in the view that we're all Americans. Yeah, we have different views, but ultimately we all live in America and we're all Americans. So it's not like these are like evil people, but it's just, it comes back to the perspective thing. Like they just have different perspectives in life that's created them to form these beliefs, whether that's they've just been stuck in an echo chamber or they've had something extreme happen in their life where they're, they feel this is the only, way that it can be stopped or, whatever it may be. But ultimately it's like, they got the viewpoints just the same way you got your viewpoints. And it should just be a civil discussion for the most part.
Yeah, I think debate as a format, it does have benefits. One of the things I liked, if you try to do actual debates, a lot of times you'll get assigned to debate something you disagree with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then you have to research to why you want to tell people gun control is good. So then you get to see things from that side. And I've tried to make those arguments. I used to do this with my little brother all the time, but he gets overly worked up. He's not a good person to have an argument, a debate, or a discussion with. He's very fixed on his points. So I try to tell him, like, let's try this. We both agree on this. So let's one of us take the viewpoint of the other side and try to discuss it that way. And he's like, there's nothing to discuss. And if you feel that way, then yeah, you won't progress forward with anybody on any topic that you disagree with. And you could go out and find people who agree with you on 90% of everything, but that's less and less likely, especially as you get more and more topics involved in there. Like I've said before, I don't think Star Wars A New Hope is the best Star Wars. I think it's actually like the worst one. And I've had, I've been attacked.
We were just talking about this. I agree with you, Michael.
Yeah, see? Yeah.
Jacob attacked me over it yesterday.
No,
literally yesterday.
I don't think it's the best one.
Yeah, it's not.
But I don't think it sucks. You said it sucks.
I think it's trash, dude.
I think in comparison now, with all the lore we have, A New Hope just needs to be remade.
Just look at Darth Vader's suit in it. It doesn't fit him.
The first guy he force chokes in all of Star Wars canon, he actually picks him up with his hand and chokes him.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a remote thing. It's nothing like that. He's just like, this guy.
Yeah.
Like, haha. And I think it's
But we wouldn't have what we had now if it wasn't for A New Hope.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But then it's like, it's like we wouldn't have what we had if it wasn't for the first book of Moses. But that's, arguably not the best, book in the Bible there. It's, I don't know, Genesis actually probably is my first. But that's a whole separate thing, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, Yeah. No, I mean, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
but
it's good to try to at least get an idea what the other viewpoint is, even if you don't agree with it.
yeah.
On the abortion thing, so again, just to like a little bring this up, because this has been an unintended, but I think very welcome thing that's happened to our stores, is we've become the store that a lot of people go to who don't agree with a lot of us. Like they obviously they want to be gun owners, but we have a large amount of people that don't fit in with the standard, like straight white conservative male, Alaskan.
Yeah.
So we have a group, like I don't know, it's probably like 7 of them at this point of transgender people that come to our store. But we still have these peaceful conversations. I know for certain if we got into it, we would like very much disagree on Star Wars, but we still keep these conversations going because we have a common ground. We both think that we all think that guns are a means of protection, or in some cases, to a lesser degree. I don't like the argument that it's for hunting. Majority of people buy guns for self-defense, not for hunting. Hunting is definitely a good part of it, but you can hunt with other things too. So I don't think that's a good argument. It's harder to defend yourself against guns with something other than a gun.
Yeah.
So it's great that we have people that come in who, have a "I voted for Bernie" shirt on, and we can still have this conversation about this, and use that to work into the other stuff. So I've done that before with abortion. Talking about abortion, everybody has that one's such a raw topic for everyone.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, a lot of people don't realize it's raw for the other side. Like,
yeah, they think it's only important to their, from their perspective.
And we always point out the extremists on both sides. Like, I get people have shared me those videos where like women are bragging that they've had like 14 abortions or something. That's such a minority. The majority of people don't actively go out there like, how many abortions can I get this week? Which is one. You can't, if done right, you can't.
Oh no!
Yeah, you'd have to work really, like, so 14 would be insane. Like that would take some time. And also, that's a sport that currently most males can't compete in. Not that it shouldn't be a sport, but anyway, it's. It's a hard topic. Same thing too, though. We talk about that. We talk about immigration. I know people who are more pro-immigration on the conservative side than on the liberal side. They just don't agree with what like immigration is.
Yeah.
I was the guy who was my stepfather for the bulk of my childhood was from Pakistan, and he came here legally. He came here on a work visa, met my mom, got married, applied for other status and all that. And they were married for, I think, like 14 years or whatever. And then one of them went crazy and the other one continued to be from Pakistan. But they, at the same time, I had a sister-in-law from Honduras who came here illegally, but it was really to no fault of her own. That's the education they told her in Honduras. Like, this is how you get to America. You go and you cross the southern Mexican border, and you have to sneak all the way through Mexico, and then you got to find some shady white guy who's going to drive you through the desert, likely steal everything you have, rape you, and leave you there. And that's how you become a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
And and she didn't realize till afterwards that there was so many other options. But then that gets back into like how immigration's handled in our system. My stepfather, who came here legally, and my sister-in-law, who came here illegally, both applied for like extensions around the same time. They gave her way more time. Well, hers was an extension. She was like, "Hey, I'm here illegally, but I'd like to stay here."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh yeah, you got like 7 years to figure it out or whatever." And he's like, "I'm here legally. I'm supposed to go back soon, but my life has changed now, and I'd like to stay here." And they're like, "What country are you from again?" I was like, "Oh, it's like we're gonna give you like a few months to figure this out."
Yeah.
And that's like the whole thing, because most people I met who, like I said, people who have escaped from those places. Pakistan's not as bad as like some other places, but
right.
They want to live here. They want to be Americans here. They want to do American life. And it's great. I worked for a company for over 10 years. Both the owners were from Pakistan, and they both took care of their community here and where they came from. It's like every time they got money, they would do things to build up their community in Kansas City. But then every few years they would go to Pakistan and help bring clean water to some of those villages. Like, I think that's amazing. He was able to get to that part, and he had a lot of hard work doing that. And his life was a great example of why you can't judge people based on, these categories. When he first came to America, he was in New York, and his first actual paycheck job was a guy who owned a convenience store who was from Israel, and he wasn't expecting this guy to give him a job because he was told like they hate Muslims. So like people don't understand that our prejudices are on both sides. Everybody's taught that the other side hates you.
Yeah.
Not taught like we're not sitting here in class and be like, well, actually, no, so sometimes they do sit in class and tell people like these people hate you. I went to a elementary school where I was like maybe one of 5 white kids. And I remember when we were talking about slavery and all that, the teacher pointed at me so many times during that. It's like, white people used to own us.
No way.
Yeah. But I was really bad, and I wasn't good. I had really poor grades in that school, and I
wonder why.
Yeah. But I didn't let that affect me. I never got out assuming that all history teachers hated me. This is just one particular history teacher who didn't like me.
Yeah.
I've met some nice history teachers. There's some good ones. But
yeah, dude, that's wild.
Yeah, it's definitely an
adult just pointing at a little white kid.
But I actually think I benefited from that by having a whole school, and it wasn't like it became such a problem at that school. They actually their white enrollment dropped more and more and more all the time because it kept being an issue. They actually put us on a taxi at the end of the day. We didn't go in the school bus with the other kids. It was me and 2 other white kids that lived not even really close to each other. They put us in a taxi to drive us home, which was weird. But that let me see that. That let me see what it's like to be judged based on something I have no control over.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like a like something I agree with. Like, so like when this Black Lives Matter stuff came up, I'm like, oh yeah, I understand. Like I've had a whole school like plot against me. But if you try to share that experience with certain people, they're like, well, you couldn't have understood though because you're white. And,
right.
And that gets back because but I don't blame them for that opinion either. That's what they're told. They're told that these people can't do that, and they believe it because they agree with other things that person says. We don't take into account individual experiences enough, and we all have unique experiences.
Yeah, I mean, and our experiences shape, who we end up being and some of the ideas that we end up having. That's just how life works.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and I think, that kind of leads into talking about, how do you have civil discourse or discussion with people? What are some things you can do? And I think you're like pinpointing on one of the very first things, which is to show respect to people. And also, I think beyond that, empathize with people on where they might be coming from. Mm-hmm. You hear the phrase like, put yourself in their shoes a lot. And I think that's kind of misused nowadays, but I think that's a good practice. I think actually hearing people out, respecting them and their time and their life experience enough to let them explain themselves and kind of give you an idea of where they're coming from is really important. And I think that's a great way to start a conversation. And that's basically on Saturday when we went out, that was what we did. We started with, tell me what you believe and why you're out here. And I think I didn't expect it. I didn't know how it was going to go. Cause we're actually going to put a video together about it. And the video is going to be talking about the same kind of thing we're talking about now, kind of from the perspective of the importance of getting out and having conversations and, the progress you can make just simply talking to people. But, I didn't know how it was going to go. I was like, is this going to be like what you see on the internet a lot where it's like quick sound bites like, hey, what do you believe about this? Well, I believe, and then it's like on to the next one. No, the very first person I confronted, we talked for 40 minutes straight. Yeah. And it's like, this is one conversation, and there's a few other people that would like chime in here and there, but it was great. And I realized like, okay, no, this is going to go well. Like we're actually talking through some of these issues.
And that when I saw that too, because I was standing next to you when you first started talking, when I realized that the conversation wasn't going to be short, because I was expecting the same kind of thing. Yeah. And that's when I started talking to the other people and that led to a lot of these a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and maybe that should be the strategy. Instead of, at these things holding up signs that say I disagree with you on the other side of the road and just yelling at each other, just come together. Just come together and just try to have a conversation. Some of the people I talked to, there was no conversation to be had. The first lady I talked to in front of Sedona Creek Park told me she had mental illnesses and she couldn't own guns, and then started saying a lot of crazier things. But I was still nice to her. And I probably spent like 5 minutes with her, but I didn't spend. There wasn't anything for either of us to gain there. And that's going to be the case sometimes. Sometimes you can't. And sometimes better to walk away. But if I walked away and I was talking to somebody else.
Yeah, you gained, I guess, the right recipe for that certain situation, I guess.
Yeah.
Because you realize, like, some people would just keep trying, like, this is what I'm here to do, so I'm going to try to do it. It's like, well, you're just wasting everyone's time.
No one
to
call today.
Yeah. And so I started talking to somebody else, and that lady eventually came over and joined that conversation. But then it was more of a conversation because then I had made ground with somebody else. So, like, if you want to like put a metaphor on it, it's like if you're digging and you hit a rock, start digging next to the rock, and eventually, you can move that rock then. We just need to go out there and have more of that. And I don't know if this should be something we try to plan on a statewide scale or even just here on the peninsula. But when the Black Lives Matter protests happened here, I was involved in that early on. I don't know how like my name got just roped in, and it was some people were concerned about. They thought they would be attacked. They thought people would come after them. I told everybody that was in that group that if you felt that way, like, send me screenshots, send me people's names. Like, I'll talk to people. I'll make sure that nobody's actually like trying to plan any violence. And we actually had a veteran who was infantry in a car with equipment near that in case it went down. He didn't agree with it. He didn't support Black Lives Matter. And then, like, when it got to the day of it, I was like, hey, well, I'll be here at this time. It's like, well, we're coming a little bit early to discuss things. Like, oh, I don't want any part of it. They're like, what? I was like, you've been here since, And I was like, no, I fully agree with your right to, like, express yourself and freedom of speech and right of assembly and all of that. It's not a viewpoint I can get on board with. I have my own opinions of that group, and I don't think it's beneficial to the group they're saying that it's beneficial to, or to America as a whole.
Yeah.
And they're mostly out there protesting police brutality that doesn't happen here. So it's like, we're not sitting here holding up signs saying, like, stop raping children in South Africa. It's not happening here. It's not an issue. It's an issue that is important. It's not an issue that I feel resonates with our community, but that led them to further rebulk that side, to feel like they were on the right side when people drove by and they were angry at them for holding up these signs. Those guys were angry not because they thought Black lives don't matter, but because they didn't have that conversation. That's how that side took it. So they took it as everybody who didn't honk in support of them and everybody who yelled at them, they were all racist.
Yeah.
And that's not the, I saw a sign, I passed by it, and it was a clever sign. And it said, what was it? Racism is little PP energy. And I'm like, that's a great sign, but it doesn't. So then does she feel that if she's holding up that sign, does she feel that everybody who doesn't wave in support of her just not only is a racist, but has a small PP?
Yeah.
It's those signs. Probably. Those signs are conversation starters.
Only one of those would be true.
Yeah. They should start conversations. Like to me, that's the point of those signs. But nobody's actually having conversations at any of these events, or not any of them, because obviously we went and had conversations. But
yeah,
your sign, if you're holding up a sign, you should be ready to defend that point of view.
Right.
And
it's surprising how many actually aren't.
Yeah.
Too. And we saw that on Saturday as well. And this kind of further to your point, you get in with it. It's your clique, it's your group. It's, I'm going to go out and do this. I'm going to be with my little fellowship of, protesters. And something that one of my teachers taught me, I think it was in either middle school or high school. She always said, if you're going to complain about something, have a well thought out solution of how to solve what you're complaining about. And I think we see that a lot of people that, it's popular in today's society. It's popular to complain.
Yeah,
it's
actually like a whole sport. It's popular.
Not only popular, it's encouraged. People encourage uh, complaining, and it's just kind of a part of who we are now. Twitter is basically just a big complaining platform.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people take the time to sit down and say, this is an issue. I don't like this. I don't agree with this. And it just ends there.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people actually go the step further and be like, okay, so how do I think we can fix this? And that's what was so interesting about being able to go out there and have these conversations was those people that didn't have an answer were weeded out very quickly.
Yeah.
I remember when we first started talking, that very first conversation, basically right after you peeled off and you realized, all right, I got to go start my own conversations. This is like, it's in it. It's happening. I had like probably 5 people right there that were kind of chiming in. And then it quickly turned into just 2.
Yeah.
And then down to 1. And I think the one lady was there just because she was older and she was sitting there and she stayed. Yeah. But there was a few that were like very, very much involved until they started hearing the kind of questions I was asking and the kind of explanation that was required. And they very quickly kind of departed the conversation.
Yeah.
Didn't have a lot to say. And when I came back around to some of those people and started asking them, they were very quick to, yeah, well, I don't really want to talk about it. And, and I think, and maybe they were shy, but I think more likely it was that they actually hadn't thought through a lot of those issues. That we were bringing up points that they had never considered, and it was just that rhetoric. They were there to just like display that message, which was common sense gun reform. Save our kids' lives. All the whatever they had on their signs. Which,
and I think a lot of people go to those things almost in the thought that I'm here as a group. I'm not here as an individual.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I'm here as an individual. I want to be seen as an individual, like that believes in this, but they don't think they're going to be confronted as an individual. They feel like they're going to be looped in as a group. So they don't go with the preparation that they're going to, get confronted. Not like in an interrogating way. I mean, some people would confront it in an interrogating way, but I know you guys were not doing it in that way. You guys were doing it in a very, friendly, civil way, but
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't remember where I was going to go with that. You said something that sparked something, and then I lost it.
Yeah.
But
train derailment.
So you were talking about like being trying to be friendly, and I think we were just being respectful.
Yeah, it's not going to get anywhere if you're just like trying to grill someone. Like, well, why do you do this? Well, why do you do that? Well, what did you ever think about this? Yeah. It's like if you're just coming at it like that, it's like, whoa, this person's kind of like coming out of left field right now. I mean, I don't really like it.
So. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I remember now. So all this stuff we're talking about, we're obviously saying that we were seeing that in this specific group, so this side of the argument, but it's still very true for our own community. And I think it's important to understand and take notes, I guess, from this situation and apply it to yourself, because we're guilty of this too. Mm-hmm. Showing up to things. Oh, I'm going to go there. I'm going to wear my, I'm going to go to this gun protest and wear full kit and stomp around, And it's like, that stuff's awesome. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I think it's important to, you said, Stephen, you were saying go as an individual, but, or you're not necessarily going as an individual, but you're going as, I want to be there to like,
to just support part of the group.
Yeah. This is my ideology.
And that's cool. And I it's important to have, identity and that's awesome. And again, I think that's part of being involved. I think that's that lends to being involved politically, but I think you need to be better. If you're listening to this and you're like, man, I just don't know, I just go to those to kind of support the whole thing. And I think it's important to take the time and take the energy to sit down and figure out, what do I actually believe, and have conversations with your own group of friends and everything like that. Talk within your, again, going back to the whole clean your room first. Mm-hmm. So talk with those who you already think you agree with, and get into the nitty gritty. Like, let's talk about, what do you think about ages? What do you think about red flag laws? Like, actually break it down. It's going to help you better understand it. You're going to get other ideas and experiences and perspectives, and again, you might be all in agreement. Ultimately, like, your ultimate goal is probably the same, but how you go about achieving it may be a little different, even within your own group. So having that solid constitution individually, and then going to something like that, I think is is how you should try to approach that, instead of just showing up and being overt and,
Yeah.
just being a part of the white noise,
Yeah.
Yeah, and going back to that same, experience, I remember, like, the military was very unique. Unique. I'm about to say unique. Very unique in that way, where you had a bunch of different people from different walks of life, all thrown into a group. And, like, I remember having, like, completely different viewpoints than other guys, but you could sit there and you could talk about it and actually, like, all right, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. Or you say something when you can tell, like, they're like, yeah, I've never thought about it that way, And I think you can do that. Some workplaces you're not probably allowed to do that,
Yeah.
But, I think in some workplaces you totally could. And that's like a bunch of people that may have completely different viewpoints. That's something different than, like us three sitting here, I would consider, Michael a friend, and obviously you're my brother. So, like, our viewpoints are very, a lot of them are going to be close to the same. There may be some differences, like you were saying, like that 90%, like that's going to be kind of a rare, or like 90% of your views are all the same.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of a rare situation.
Yeah.
But, in a group of guys that you are constantly around, and, you're kind of in you guys' own echo chamber, like a lot of the things you're going to agree, but like at work, that may not be the case. And that's kind of like a cool little experiment to do.
Yeah. When I was there in Seward for the landslide, that one of the guys I got from the ASDF from Kodiak, and then the other person that was there for the whole time with me was a 19-year-old from the Naval Militia out of Wasilla. So we actually had a few of these conversations. We got to see that, we have a few different opinions and things, but we were all fine. We were talking about it. The awesome guy from Kodiak, he said, him and his wife have different political opinions, and on like completely different sides of these things.
Yeah.
And I've seen that a lot. I've seen we've a guy that works with us who, like, him and his girlfriend don't agree with a lot of these things, and in some cases they are on like completely opposite ends of it. So if you can make it work in a household, you should be able to have these conversations, in a community. I definitely think that's dangerous, though.
I do too.
To be married, if somebody doesn't agree with you. But like, one guy came up to me while I was there in Seward and just assumed, that, like, his bias of it. He saw a person in a uniform and assumed, well, this guy is hardcore conservative then, like, because that's like that was his thing. I told him, like, no, it's like, no, I'm probably more libertarian than anything. I was like, well, what topics? Because he's like, I was like, I'm like the only lefty here, and it's like and that's not the case. Like, Seward's probably about half and half from my experience there. But he was talking about like how hard it is because all of his friends are conservatives, but he's not. He was trying to bring up these things, like, but I try to have these conversations, like, that's the best thing we can do about it. So me and this guy, he was driving one of the shuttles from the water taxi to the parking lot where the Low Point residents were. That was just what he was doing for like this whole time, I guess. We had a like 20-minute conversation one time while he was waiting for the next boat to arrive, and just about things we disagree with and where we could find common ground on that. And we talked about the gun things, and he didn't know some of that stuff I brought up, and I can't think of anything right now, but I'm sure he brought up something I didn't know. Or I'm just saying that to be nice. But it was good to have that conversation. And again, like, he had this assumption that, anybody in a uniform, police or military looking or whatever, was like this, like everybody who works at a prison is going to be this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I told him the guy I'm with is, like he said, he's more left than anything. And he's here running this thing. Like, and it's like, oh, I just kind of assumed, anybody who puts an American flag on in the morning is gonna, and like, that to me is crazy. The idea that you assume negatively about people who want to put an American flag on. I think this idea that the American flag now is like this like symbol of negativity to some people.
Yeah, it's like racist nationalism.
Yeah. And like, people wrap things up in groups. So like, it's like, well, Hitler was a nationalist, so obviously all nationalists are bad.
Yeah.
It's like Hitler was, a socialist, but we don't, oh no, we do make those conclusions. And again, like, back into, like, we do the same thing on both sides. Like, it's so easy to lump people together in groups and then judge those groups based on the actions of a minority of them. So it's like, a small group of gun owners, a very small group of gun owners are committing crimes with guns. But we judge, and we want to put restrictions on all gun owners for that. And that was always the case when we saw, like, Jim Crow laws and stuff like that. Like, we put these things in place because of an assumption of a group, not based on that actual group's thoughts or anything. We just like, well, this guy broke into my house, so everybody who looks like this guy, we should be stricter with.
Right.
Which that gets a whole other thing, because everybody breaks into people's houses and steals stuff. Like, there's grandmas who have been caught, breaking into houses.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with, it's just people's circumstances at the time. It's not something like, I have this genetics, I'm going to go do this thing at a certain point in my life. And that's the other thing too. I keep hearing all the time too, people talk about like shared culture, and we don't, I think, have a shared culture in America anymore. Like, we have like subsets of culture.
Yep.
And that's becoming more and more of an issue. But it was a lot of those people there, they were saying like, they still consider themselves patriots.
Yeah.
So I think, again, that's probably something we see here in Alaska that we might not see if we were in, New York or Washington or, Seattle or California or something like that. Those people might not consider themselves patriots. They might consider themselves opposed to patriots.
Right.
So you have to have these conversations in your, like you said earlier, like, we're all Americans, but we're also here, like, we're all living in Alaska, and we're all living on the peninsula, and we're all living, here in the central part of the peninsula. We need to have these conversations with our own community.
Yep. Definitely.
Otherwise, it's, oh, that's weird. See, my heart rate jumped up, and my watch just said I did a great workout. Let's start talking about this stuff.
Well, we've been jogging this whole time, so
yeah, in this nice three-piece suit, and the 3 monocles.
Yeah, I've been impressed with how you maintain those monocles while you're jogging.
It's hard to get it to stay in my ear, because there's no place for that 3rd monocle, but it's definitely, the sound comes through clear on that side. So.
Yeah, no, you brought up I think you nailed it, and it goes back to some of the division we see, which I think is detrimental. I think it is devolving our society.
Yeah.
Going deeper and deeper into these echo chambers, just being indoctrinated with the same repeated ideas, being validated, and, constantly getting that good euphoric feeling of being validated by, what you said and what you think is right. And it feels good. It feels good for people to come up like, I agree with you. You're right. That's awesome. And people chase that. And, I think I think it's dangerous. I think that continued, pursuit into that deeper into that kind of ideology, or that, I guess, echo chamber is the best thing I can use to describe it, is dangerous, and it's furthering the division. Something that I really learned from my time in the military that I thought was so cool is that it didn't matter what your race was. It didn't matter what your culture was. It didn't matter what your background was. We all put that flag on our shoulder. Mm-hmm. And, this kind of reminded me when you were talking about being out there and having that conversation. It was so cool to know that it didn't matter who you were and where you came from. You were there to look out for your brothers or sisters to your left and right. And that, a big part of that was because, as crazy as the military is in some ways, and as, at the levels of brainwashing that they do on just like an acceptable level somehow, with setting all that aside, the military was really good at creating community. Mm-hmm. And it was a strong community. They constantly affirmed you that you were the best of the best. You always look out for your battle buddy, those to your left and right. No one can break you. It's this constant, you are a tight-knit community. And it went, something the Army always said was like, we're not black, we're not white, we're not whatever, we're green, we're all green. Or sometimes they'd say we're all red, white, and blue. Mm-hmm. And, it sounds silly just out loud, but for those that were in the military, understand that there's never, at least from my experience, race was never a factor. Like it was never something that you cared about, In fact, it was something that you got to kind of it became part of your camaraderie. Like you would joke around about it, but
look at it. America's military compared to pretty much any country in the world, we're far more diverse.
Oh, yeah.
Than any kind, especially militaries even close to our size. Of course, like there's only a few close to our size. Like it's in our weight class, I guess. And man, we look like, Saturday Night Live compared to like like we got people from all walks of life. Well, I don't know. Saturday Night Live is probably not the best example of that anymore. But yeah, it's and people don't acknowledge that. Like, I do think some of the stuff that's come up with race, and like that's tied to everything now, right? It's like that's tied to the abortion argument. It's tied to the gun control argument. Like race comes up all the time. And I actually, while I was there, I brought it up like 2 or 3 times because I wanted to know why. So many people, they would bring up certain events. I'm like, yeah, like the ones where all the white kids died. Like, yeah. But like, what about all these events that are happening in areas with strict gun control where, non-white kids die on a regular basis? What does this that you're pushing change anything for them? Because they're already living in a place with strict gun control.
Yeah.
And this isn't helping them.
And why are you only out here now after the white kids?
Yeah. And then they always like, oh, no. This one here, that was, and then like they look to each other. It's like, they weren't white, right? It's like, yeah. It's like, yeah, this one here. But yeah, race comes up in all this stuff now because
it shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't. Yeah. It doesn't. If a child dies, the child dies. Like, I don't even care if the child, thought that New Hope was better. It still doesn't really, justify. I mean, children should never die. You should never want that. Nobody should. You don't want anybody to die, but things happen, and
it's life.
Yeah.
There's bad. Evil exists in our world, and it's not something you can regulate. It's not something you can write a law and force it out of existence. It's going to be there, and we need to deal with it. And
the best way to deal with it is with other guns.
Yeah,
and that's. You made the comment about the person saying, "Oh, well, you're from Alaska, so that makes sense why you have guns." And it's like, and then all those people had guns because they're like, yeah, it's the best defense against bear. Well, why is it the best defense against bears? Because it levels the playing field.
Yeah.
Well, what about you versus someone with a gun?
Yeah, and like
it's the same exact situation.
Yeah, living in a big city, I was far more likely to face a guy with a gun than I am here to face a guy with a bear.
Which is as scary as
a guy with a bear.
It's happened before. I've seen it.
Just like
get him.
Forget the alligator man. Yeah, there's a guy who keeps a bear in her garage. Yeah.
No, but seriously, like, I mean, what would I rather face? A monster that we have living amongst us up here in Alaska, or a monster that we have living up here against us in Alaska? It's like it's kind of like, okay, yeah, you got someone who's mentally ill with a gun, or a bear. It's like, well, I mean, either one, I'm not really wanting to deal with without a gun. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's a force equalizer. It's a tool, and it levels, like you said, levels the playing field. Kind of going back to the conversation, I think it's an important conversation to have. And we're kind of getting off topic, but I think we're getting into like good points you can make. But yeah, no, we did bring up, the outrage over these school shootings, which there absolutely should be, and they have ramped up. School shootings have increased, but like you said before, they still make up a very small percentage of the gun violence or the deaths due to firearms that are out there. And yeah, you look at a lot of like Chicago and different metropolitan areas, big cities like that, where there's a lot of inner city crime, and black children or minorities children are getting murdered, and it's terrible. And it's always reminded me, and because those conversations came up in some of my own conversations with them, or those points came up, and they're very quick to no, that's terrible too, and but we need to make a change. It's like, okay, but they have tried to change there. They've been pursuing the same goals that you're promoting here today to no avail. It's actually gotten worse. We've seen the trends, and they're like, well, that's because there's more guns. It's like, okay, but how is there more guns when
it's harder to get guns?
It's harder to get guns there. And
and people act like just because, okay, well, the reason why that there's even guns in California and Chicago is because someone crossed the border from somewhere that they can get guns. It's like, okay, that's a good point, but let's pretend like somehow America does take all the guns out, like somehow they just do a mass sweep, take out every single gun that there ever is. There's still the issue that we have with immigration. Yes, I agree that the people who want to come over illegally and they actually do want to become Americans, because I served with a lot of them that got their citizenship by enlisting. They straight up came across illegally, and they're solid dudes, great Americans. And I think those people, like, I wish we had better avenues for them to actually get to America. I don't think that we should completely stop that, but what I do think we should stop is the ability for cartel to get.
Oh yeah.
Because everyone talks about, oh yeah, they bring in drugs, they bring in they're raping people and all this stuff, but it's like one of the biggest things they do is they run guns.
Yeah.
Like that's like one of their biggest profits. And it's like those are guns that are completely legal, and the people that are getting those guns are people who do not care about your laws.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to ever stop guns. Like that's just the way it is. So
if they ever do fully ban guns, I want to say right here, right now, that I will be still selling them and manufacturing them and selling them illegally under the George Washington Bridge, and the password is going to be 6 Semper Tyrannis.
Okay,
just in case things happen. Yeah.
I'll keep it in
be
mind.
there. I'll be in the trench coat. I'll look like the typical NPC character.
You want to see my wares?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, and these are the things that, I think a point came up, basically saying, kind of going back to children and stuff. It's like, well, why are you outraged over this when kids die every single weekend in Chicago? And it's like, well, that's terrible. And it's like, okay, but you're out now. Like this got brought up now. And same thing with like the cartel and all the things that happen there, and the just mass atrocities that happen at the borders. And, it's like, well, why is this the catalyst for you showing up and coming out over the sign?
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that scene from Batman: The Dark Knight, where the Joker says that he makes that line about, if a truck full of soldiers gets blown up, nobody cares because that's all part of the plan, know. But if one little mayor, everyone loses their minds, he makes that whole thing. But that's exactly what it is.
It is,
People, there is violence, there is evil, there is atrocities taking place every single day.
Yeah.
Like in the length of this conversation we've had, there'll be several deaths.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what they were from. But it's interesting to me that the catalyst is always, one of these schools or something like that, when there's a problem existing all the time. And, we see the solutions within our statistics. Just look at the places that have promoted more proactive defense, whether it's armed defense or whatever, or places that have better budgets for law enforcement. There's a ton of variables you could get into. But without a doubt, it's always these strict liberal run, high level of gun control areas that have the hardest, the biggest problems with it. And that's something that you just have to bring up. Like you have to talk about it. But going back to what the Joker said, like a school getting shot up is not part of the plan. I think people accept that, in these low inner city, like, poverty stricken neighborhoods, that stuff's just going to happen and there's nothing we can do about it. But hey, this school shouldn't be able to be shot up. And it's kind of sad that people have basically given up on big groups of our nation because it's like, they're poor and they're black or whatever it is. There's again ton of different things there, but I don't know. I get passionate about it because it's like, man, everyone should have access to the education, the tools, and the training that they need to employ or deploy a force equalizer, a gun, a tool to defend themselves and their family. That's your inalienable right to be able to do that. Yeah. And again, we're basically just building up our echo chamber here. Right. But
it's something to bring up because like a lot of people just don't have the tools they don't know what they're bringing up. They know they hold their opinion, but they don't know why. Like, the force equalizer thing, of course, the majority of people we see at gun shops are, white guys who all own guns anyways. But we have some ladies come in. We see more ladies now, I think, after like 2019. It seems like it's picked up a lot. I've seen a lot more ladies here locally. But, it's hard to tell. There's been cases you can find where a woman files for a restraining order and then files for a gun permit the same day and is in an area where there is a waiting period. And during that time, the guy shows up and kills her. And it wouldn't have happened if it might have still happened. I guess I can't say it wouldn't have happened,
but a better chance that she could have actually defended herself.
And I think anybody, again, like I'm a big proponent of like warrior culture. That if we learn how to take care of ourselves, we protect our community better, we protect our nation better, we protect our planet better. Because eventually, aliens will come for us, but that's a whole, um,
Aliens.
Would you? Yeah, aliens. Yeah. I think anybody would rather. I think it's weird that people say like, yeah, I'd rather die not raising arms against the person killing me. And it's like, why? Like, I'd much rather, die on my feet.
Judged by 12 and carried by 6.
Yeah. And I've said that to people too. People ask me, I tell them, and of course, Alaska does have pretty good self-defense laws. It's actually not the most lenient. Like, I think, what state is that?
I think Florida's pretty lenient, isn't it?
Some of those states, you can like go to like if you see a guy breaking into your neighbor's house down the street, you can go shoot that guy in the back, and they're like, "Yep, well, he shouldn't have done that."
Yeah,
I can see Texas being that way since
they have
like
castle
still have the death
there.
penalty and stuff like that all there.
Yeah, so like I tell people here, like if somebody's breaking into your shed, you can't legally go shoot them.
Nope.
And I was like, and also like morally, if they're breaking into your shed, like, okay, like it's when they're breaking into your house, it's like when life is at danger. I'm not saying I wouldn't. I'm not saying if somebody's like trying to actively catch my house on fire and nobody's in it, I'm not going to be upset or anything. But it's that idea of protecting life is like the whole idea for me why I want to carry a gun and have a gun available to me and to my kid and to my everyone.
You can't stop rape though in the state.
Yeah, and then you should. Yeah, rape is to me.
I say if you come up on just for all the Alaskans out there, I don't know about other states, but I'm just saying. Crossing the threshold in your home, life's in stake, and then also rape. If you come up on someone raping someone, you're legally allowed to take their life.
In that case, but when we get into those cases,
and anywhere that your life is in jeopardy at all.
Yeah. But I'm just saying,
when we get into those cases, if let's say it wasn't legal, and I didn't have a gun, if I saw somebody raping somebody, I'd still do whatever I could.
Oh yeah,
to stop that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if I knew I'd go to jail afterwards.
Yeah,
because
that's like
you have to live through that moment before you can deal with anything later on. Take me to jail. I had to get through that moment. If this guy was threatening my kid's life, or if this guy was threatening my life, my options was to potentially die right there, or let them kill my kid, just to avoid jail time. Like, no, put me in jail. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right answer. I don't think I should go to jail, and I think most time courts would not send people to jail. I guess, but it depends on where they're at. But you have to be able to survive in that moment. You have to be able to live with that moment afterwards. If you let somebody make you a victim, that can affect you for your life. I know people who something happened to them at a young age, and it's affected them for life. We see again, like back into veterans and PTSD levels and stuff like that. The other group that has high PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is kids in orphanages and foster care system. It's like I think in most states, I think it's a higher. Like, it's crazy the percentage of kids who have lived through traumatic experiences at a younger age with less tools on how to cope with what's happened to them. And that affects their and those people are often people that will shoot up a school or get into drugs or break into people's houses or go out raping people because they were raped at a young age. And there's this cycle that continues there. That's why I still think the biggest preventative measure for any of this is just to care about your neighbor. Even if your neighbor has science that says like, you're wrong, I disagree with you on this. I've said before, if somebody comes to my shop and they're wearing a t-shirt that has my face on it, says I need a gun to kill Michael, and like it's my face, I'll still show them a gun if they feel like I'm a threat to their life and they want some protection against it. I mean, I'm going to be a little edgy around them, but I'm not going to tell somebody just because people bought guns in 2020 because they were scared the election that Trump would get elected. Like, there were Democrats who bought guns because they felt they were going to get further marginalized.
Yeah,
that's fine. I mean, I don't think they would. I don't think they have. And of course, the election didn't go that way. But and there was people on the other side who bought guns because they thought the election would turn, and it did, and that gun laws would get stricter, and that's what is being brought up now. So nobody's wrong. If somebody has a reason they want a gun, then who are you
They're
to
justified.
tell
them? Yeah, it's their right. So
yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like the whole Second Amendment, First Amendment. Again, people get so confused. They're like, the government's giving us these rights, and that was never the point of the Bill of Rights. It was the government won't stop these things. Like the government won't take these from you. Like, so like some of the other ones, people don't harp on, like the idea that they won't house soldiers in your house. Like, nobody brings up that amendment ever. Because it doesn't.
That's
seem
a
like
pretty
a big
important
deal.
one.
It is, because we went to our military doctrine in other countries, we'll go to people's houses in the middle of the night. We'll tell them they have like so many minutes to leave. We'll give them cash or a voucher, and then we'll occupy their house because we need a place and we don't have a network there.
Yeah.
They can't do that here, and that seems silly, but wouldn't you hate that?
Yeah,
like, you get a
terrible.
knock on the door at 3:00 in the morning, like, hey, you have 30 seconds to get out of this house.
Yeah.
28 guys are going to be sleeping in here. We're going to throw all your shit against the wall. We're going to try to be as nice as possible, but we got to fit a whole bunch of guys in here, and they need sleep. Like, they need like 4 hours of sleep, like right now.
Yeah.
And like that's
crazy.
That sucks. But like those laws, those amendments were put in place because we lived through that. We lived through the British military coming in, the Empire right at the time. I guess
Yeah.
it was like
The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, they tried. It was
Yeah.
It's a thing. Like we made those 10, and there was, if you look at early American history and the founding fathers, there was definitely a lot more than 10 for a long time. It was boiled down to these in there. Sadly, again, race always gets brought up. There was a lot of them who were on board with ending slavery right then, and they just couldn't get it. And that's the thing. Like sometimes you can't win that fight today. And America did eventually win that fight. It was sad that we had the bloodiest like civil war ever about it.
Yeah.
But that was still, and that was like I don't want to get sidetracked there, but that was the start of the Republican Party, was like running on this idea that maybe we're all equal. And it took a long time. It wasn't just the Civil War, and it wasn't just civil rights movement, and but the problem with a lot of the stuff that comes up now with race and gun control and abortion and all that stuff that's tied into that now is we don't acknowledge how far we've come. And we're a really young nation still, and we've done so much in such a short amount of time. And we, like I said, we are diverse. Look at the number of millionaires under 30 in America. It's not a whole bunch of like the new ones. It's not a whole bunch of like just rich white kids. Like, we have athletes that come up who come up from poor neighborhoods who are millionaires now. And we have actors that come up who are millionaires now. And we have people doing podcasts and stuff like that. It's
TikTokers.
Yeah. It's possible for anybody. But what's so weird is so many of those voices, they get up there, they go from a low income house, and they get to where they have $1 million mansion. They're showing you the mansion, but then they're telling you can't do it because you're being held down. And this idea of like we're sold this victim mentality, and we're selling it continuously to our youth all the time. We're still telling, we tell women that they don't have the same rights they used to, when we've made massive progress, towards that. So like you can acknowledge that there's things that still need to happen, but there's no acknowledging that all we've done. The whole
We've come a long ways. Yeah.
what's that? You think you're flying, but you're standing on the shoulders of giants. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Paraphrasing again. But people always, those riots what kept happening. It's like, oh, we can destroy all of this. Like, we'll rebuild it. Will be better. It's like, it took 100 years for this city to be built. Like, you can't rebuild this.
Yeah.
And they don't understand. And even if you can, let's say you rebuild it in a summer, you were able to rebuild it because of infrastructure that took years and years and years to make. American military, it was so great because we built up all this infrastructure, and we got stuff all around the world ready to do horrible things at any moment, just because that's our safety net there. And I think it's crazy that there are people who think we should still stay militarily dominant, but don't agree we should own guns. And to me, it's a similar argument. We order stuff from Amazon from another country, it shows up on time because our trade routes are protected. If you order stuff online in other parts of the world, delays due to piracy is a real thing that can happen.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. People don't understand how amazing we have it, and like how safe we are from guns in this country compared to some places, and how safe we are from just tons and tons of things, this and that and the other thing. And we lose it. We don't acknowledge any of our progress as a nation because there's such a large percent of us now that are just trying to tear us apart and make us hate each other. And that's what the whole echo chamber to me, that's like they try to feed that as much as possible on both sides. And there's people on the right that I agree with a lot of the stuff they're doing, but not how they're doing it. And like there's been commentators who have come forward, like in legal cases, stated that who they are on their show is a character. And I still agree with some of those characters' points of views, but if you acknowledge that this is an act, you're putting this on, then it's like, for who? Like, you're just rallying up this side. And there's for sure any of the late night talk show comedian political shows. Those things make me so sad because they're literally just trying to make a joke out of our lives and like how we do things. And that's not just a left thing, because there's who's the Change My Mind guy?
What's that guy's name?
The most American Canadian.
It's gonna drive me nuts.
I'm gonna think of it here in like 3 seconds. But
the guy that sits down and has the, I believe in this, change my mind.
The Change My Mind segments, I think, are some of the best things he's done ever. I think more people should do that.
Yeah.
But he also has a late night talk show format show.
Yep, he does.
There's some good things that happen there, but again, the bulk of that, and I understand he's trying to prove a point. He's trying to combat the other side that's doing the same thing, but it doesn't help. What was that thing? If you wrestle a pig in the mud, you'll both get dirty, but the pig will be happy.
Yeah.
The pig doesn't care.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a tactic we should go with it. Or, again, like everybody brings up Fox and say,
Crowder.
Crowder, Louder with Crowder. Yeah, that was his.
My brain was over here working.
Like,
it's behind the scenes, dude. Getting
had to
after
happen. Yeah, we get so worked up on our sides that we forget that we're supposed to be on the same side.
Yeah.
If you go back and look at civil rights, there was things we did during that needed to happen that now we look at, even on the side, even like on Republicans who were behind a lot of that civil rights stuff. We look at that and say like, oh, you shouldn't be able to do that. It's like we did do it, and that's what worked before. So it's like it's hard to tell people not to do the thing that worked before.
Right.
And I understand things change, but you should always be able to see how progress was made and try to emulate that. We just get too focused on our sides. And
yeah. Well, and again, it goes back to the age-old saying, if you ignore history, then it's doomed to repeat itself. Mm-hmm. It's not. I don't think I said that quite right, but it's something along those lines.
Yeah.
This is I'm the master of paraphrasing, but
that's why the SIF should always worry about young guys who grow up on desert planets, because obviously in the end they'll just keep coming back and causing them issues.
Is that an absolute?
Yeah. Oh no.
Only Sith deal an absolute.
I'll just jump off the side here.
I've always thought that's funny though, because that's also an absolute statement.
No,
only Sith deal in absolutes.
Yeah, I don't want to get sidetracked.
Obi-Wan.
Have you read the the Jedi code versus the Sith code?
Yeah,
the Sith code. I agree with the Sith code far more than the Jedi.
Well, that's kind of where you start to get into like the gray, the gray Jedi thing, where it's kind of a blend of, it's a balance.
But the Mandalorian's a Super Warrior Codex. Like that's not necessarily the Mandalorian from the Mandalorian show, because he's a cultist. But not that I disagree with all of his cult tactics or anything, but in general, I'm a proponent of of warrior culture, and there's some elements of the Mandalorians that I agree with. Not necessarily making a 4-year-old wear a helmet that weighs like 7 pounds, at least 7 pounds. His whole life.
Strong necks.
Oh yeah, man! Can you imagine getting headbutt by a guy who just walks around with that all the time?
Well, yeah, that and the fact that you're getting headbutted by a helmet, because
he's
got his helmet on.
That's nice. Never helmetless.
Yep. No, yeah, I think you're bringing up some really good. It's important because again, it comes back to context and perspective, and in order to appreciate where you are, you definitely have to look back at where you came from. That's like, I think it's awesome that you brought that up. It's super important. And that kind of goes back into, getting back into having civil discourse and some different ways you can do it, which I'll probably just read these. I actually have like 10 good points that I kind of wrote down, and we can kind of keep like talking through them. But, so point 1 is show respect for all those in the discussion. So regardless of their point of view, which I think we've really like covered that well. Then focus on a main issue or topic that you want to talk about. So when you're going to have discourse, you're obviously coming together over a specific topic. Like, for example, us on Saturday was, protecting our schools. That was kind of the topic. And then the third one is find agreeable common ground. So again, to use the same example, our agreeable common ground, regardless of your opinion, was protecting our children. Mm-hmm. And then from there, encourage open dialogue, which I think went very well. They actually allowed us to speak quite a bit too. They let me go on pretty long, explanations, and they would sit and listen and kind of ask some questions. And then obviously they had that they had that side as well. They actually talked a lot more than I did, and I don't know if it went that way for you or not.
I think some groups, yeah, I'm probably about half and half still.
Yeah, but what's cool though is that most of the discussion was just off of like simple questions that I asked, and so it was them trying to navigate to like why either to answer the question or, you know, kind of figure out more of what they actually thought. Like you could see a lot of like, oh, I've never actually thought of that. Let me work through that, you know. So the fifth point is be mindful of tone and facial expressions. So you don't want to be condescending. You don't want to be like acting like a superior. You know, you don't want to talk down to people.
Doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. And, it's just, you can tell when it's happening too. Like the one lady in particular that I referred to as the moral superior earlier, she definitely had a condescending tone.
Yeah.
And, you know, listen here, little boy, you know, it was kind of that thing, which
I had a guy which was fine, Invisalign braces. That's the only thing I remember about him at all. And he kept doing that, and his wife chimed in every now and then. But she'd chime in, and she's like, hey, I just want to throw this in there real quick. I'm just going to say this real quick. And then she's like, I'm sorry, honey, I didn't mean to interrupt what you're saying. And then she just disappeared again. And it was interesting talking to the both of them, but they actually believed in outright complete ban of all firearms.
Oh yeah.
But they were passing out cards for firearm safety classes. So it was like firearm safety through abstinence kind of thing. You know, which that was
That's interesting.
Yeah. Invisalign. That's all I can. That's his name.
That's his name. Point 6, allow others time to share their opinions and ideas. So it kind of goes back into that.
And then a lot of this gets wrapped up in the just show respect in the discussion. Because like ultimately, like making faces at people is not very respectful.
And that's hard to do sometimes. People have said things to me before that have made me twitch, but you know, you just try to tough it out. They're trying to share part of their heart with you. You don't have to agree with it, but don't just drop somebody's heart. You know, don't just like, well, that's disgusting. And no, there's certain topics I'll probably do that with, but again, that's more of my own bias there.
Right.
But
yeah, and you know, again, going back to being respectful, like everyone kind of has their own style or like way. Like listening back to some of the like footage that we captured out there, there's a couple times I can be a little snarky. So like, there's a few things that I kind of would like jab in there, but it was like Steven was listening to some and he like cracked up at a couple times but he knows me well, so he knows that was like a little bit of a
and it didn't sound bad,
you know, like,
but it was just more like like what was the one?
It was when the lady said she put me in this scenario. It was the moral superior. She put me in the scenario of you're the president now. You make changes. I remember her now. Yeah, and so I immediately said, I was like, well, you know, I kind of was like, well, it's a good thing I'm not the president, you know, I kind of played that. She was like, no, you're the president. Like you have to make the decisions. And again, this will be I don't remember exactly how it went down, but she said, so what laws would you make right now? And so I right away said, well, first of all, I would, you know, as the president, I would hope that the Congress, the Senate, and the judicial system would be responsible for that because that's their job to make the laws, not the president, right? And I kind of threw in a right, like, you know, and it was like it was pretty fast and a little bit snarky, but I kind of transitioned back into being like really, and it came from like a friendly place. Like I don't think she picked up on it, but because she kept telling me like, well, I've been a teacher for
you could hear her in the background go, and
she go, Like,
Ron Paul did that when he was running in 2016. You know, they was asking, it was a big thing at the time. It was asking everybody, it's still a big thing, I guess. It was asking everybody, it's like, what's your opinions on gay marriage? And, you know, this person's like, well, I think we should legalize it or ban it, right? It goes to Ron Paul and it's like, what do you think we should do on gay marriage? He goes, like, as the president, that's not even anything I'm supposed to deal with. You know, like, just enlightening, everybody else is just trying to win points. And he's like, that's not even my thing. Like, that's somebody else's fire to put out.
Right.
Like, and he's like, personally, it's like, that should be handled on a state by state basis, not a federal thing anyways. You know, it's like I think you misunderstand what the president's supposed to be doing. Yeah. And he was the only person that came out there and he gave his opinion on it, but also like that's not it. That's not what we're supposed to do.
Well, it's like, you know, we live in a world now where executive orders are just like commonplace.
Yeah.
And
it's terrifying.
They're bad. Yeah. Like I don't agree with them at all. Like, you know, and you get a lot of people that are like, well, you know, like Trump, you know, it's on both sides. Like, Trump, like, thank goodness he did that executive order. And I've always kind of looked at it like, well, that was in my opinion, I think that's an overreach of power. Like, I think there's very specific instances where it may make sense, but honestly, I'm a big fan of the system we have in place. The representatives and the senators on behalf of the people that voted for them, and the people and not even the people that voted for them, but the people in their communities, the people they represent. They represent you as a community. They're your spokesperson.
Yeah, regardless if you voted them in or not, they are your spokesperson.
Yep. Yeah, they go and then are supposed to take the things that you want as a society to the table and say, hey, we need to work on this. We need to do these things. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that cut and dry anymore.
Yeah.
But that's the process. And yes, it's a lengthy process, but it should be a lengthy process. We don't want to just, abandon all our freedom in pursuit of safety.
That was again, I'm not gonna remember who said it. To trade freedom for security. How's that quote go?
That's was it
Benjamin Franklin?
Benjamin Franklin, yeah.
He would trade a little bit of freedom for a little bit of security. It deserves neither.
Yeah.
And I think it goes on further. It's like, and is prepared for a master. Because you're just like enslaving yourself to it. And that's the thing. To anytime you relinquish something that you can take care of to anybody, an individual or a government or anything, you're losing a little bit of freedom. And ideally, you would do that in hopes of some sort of safety net. But the government often, if we ever give the government a power, they don't let it go. We keep relinquishing to them, and we're not gaining that safety net back.
Right. It's like the same thing. Like, let's say I chose a different life, and this happens a lot. This is like the typical American nowadays. But I go off to college. I get done with college. I'm not making much money, so I decided to move back in with my parents because it's like, okay, I got the security of now I have somewhere to live. Which there's nothing wrong with that. But guess what? Their house, their rules.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You have just then sacrificed, the ability to make decisions for yourself by doing that. And it's the exact same concept with our government. You give the government the power to give you all the security you need, then, well, they're going to run the show then.
Yeah. And then if you have a monopoly on anything, like that doesn't need to pan out right. Yeah. It's not something I want to do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to hand over my ability, why go to the grocery store, pick out your own food? The government knows what's better for you to eat. We'll just issue you rations based on that, diet, which I think that's coming next year. I think we're getting pretty close to that one.
Yeah. Could be.
It's like, you don't need guns to protect yourself. We've hired and trained individuals that will protect you. And, sometimes people might fall through the cracks. It's like, but we're doing a pretty good job. And it's like, you don't need to design your own house. It's like, it's going to be dangerous. Your steps might be the wrong size and a firefighter might get hurt.
Yep.
Which that's the whole argument for the requirement to pass the to get insured on your house. Your steps have to be a certain size so that if a firefighter in the middle of the night is going through your house, he knows how to walk up your stairs. I think that's mean to firefighters. You made a law about how they can only walk up standardized stairs.
Yeah.
Like you penalize people for not making firefighter safe stairs. I get sidetracked on that one for a while.
Well, and that goes fully into like how communist, like that's like communist ideology. Like everyone will have the same thing, and you'll all be on the same playing field, and it'll be what is strategically allotted for you, and and that's it. So, but getting back to some of the points for having good civil discourse. So 6 was the allow others time to share their opinions and ideas, and then 7 I think is really important. Be confident but considerate. So, like, be confident in what you believe. Understand it intimately if you can. I don't think you should go and talk to anyone if you are confused about it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you also need to be willing to learn, and that's also being considerate of others. Someone else, just because you've studied it well and just because you're very confident in it doesn't mean you need to belittle anyone or like be overbearing or talk over someone.
Mm-hmm.
I think allowing them space and time to kind of talk is good. 8 would be avoid emotional reactions. So don't get invested. And I think that's easier for some people. Like it's actually pretty easy for me. Like I don't have I don't get emotionally connected really to like a conversation, unless it's someone I highly respect or someone that I, love or something, then there's obviously emotion attached to that. But if it's like you're having civil discourse with someone, you go into it already knowing that you're probably going to disagree, then set yourself up for success. Don't go into it like, oh, as soon as they make a mean remark or as soon as they say something I don't agree with or whatever, it's like, I'm just going to get pissed off or super sad or whatever. Like, try to keep your emotion out of it and keep it logical if possible. 9 is know when to agree to disagree. So that's kind of like you were talked about that earlier. Like you realized with that one person, like, oh, this is, I'm probably going to have to call it a day in this conversation. Yeah. I think there is a point where out of mutual respect, you need to just step away. You're not going to win everybody over.
Yeah.
And you don't have to. Like that's not what it's about. And then the final point, and then we can kind of talk more about these as we keep going, but is 10, end on a positive note, even if nothing's resolved.
Yeah.
So,
and I was trying to do that too. If I did leave somebody and it wasn't a good spot, I'd still shake their hand and thank them.
Yeah.
Or be willing to engage in the conversation, even if we didn't get anywhere with it.
Yeah.
Because we're, again, like, ideally, if you go to those things because you want to win people over. So I was just giving them a chance to win me over more so than I was trying to win them over, I was going in there to listen to them. And if I went in there with that kind of like mindset, so that it's easier to sit there. Like I'll let them rant. I'll keep little notes so that when they're done talking, I can say my opinion on those things they brought up. And it's hard though. I know it's any of these things. People get so emotionally worked up, emotionally invested into it. So it's hard to sit there and let somebody tell you to your face they think how you're living is wrong.
Yeah.
And then you need to respond kindly.
Yeah.
It's hard, but you get far further ahead with that than just yelling at them. Because if you go to yell at them, then that's just going to paint the picture that those people that they disagree with are, violent and don't talk and they're uncivil and so that just further makes them dug into their position, and
it validates it.
Yeah,
that's like it was. You and I talked a little bit about it after we were out there on Saturday. But you and I were both frustrated with some of the people that drove by and how they acted, because there was several times that I had people in conversations say, we didn't know what to expect when you guys walked up, because honestly, we've been treated very poorly by your side of the discussion. And I was like, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, we've had people throw stuff at us and we've had people like call us like, terrible names and intimidate us. And it's like, well, I was like, oh, I don't agree with that. I'm sorry to hear that. This is your right to protest.
Yeah.
It's your freedom, just like it is mine to be out here right now asking you about it. And you shouldn't ever feel, I don't believe in this country you should ever feel intimidated at any point to go out and, make your views known.
Yeah.
But literally while we're having these conversations, people were driving by like, F you and flipping people off. There's a guy that pulled in and like burnt out and like kicked rocks up and like towards them and, things like that I think, I believe you said at the end, that you wished you would be able to track those people down and tell them like, hey, this isn't making anything better.
Yeah.
But while that stuff happened, they would just point at it and be like, see, that's,
and
so
it just makes them feel,
further entrenches them in their defiance against, the whole idea. It's
and
like,
and that guy, though,
the whole idea.
The guy who's yelling out of his truck or whatever, I understand, and him too, him or her, because there was a lady that yelled like she supports the NRA.
Yeah.
She yelled at them, which is funny, but
that's a different podcast for a different time.
I understand. Again, like they're upset. They see that stuff. They feel like somebody's holding up signs like saying you're wrong. How you live your life is wrong. Here's a group of people we've got together in town. We all had coffee before this, and we sat around. We discussed how you're wrong, and we decided to make signs to hold them up about how you're wrong. So as you're passing by, and you feel personally attacked, so you want to do something against it. But when you're in the car and you're yelling back, who are you winning points with? You get to tell your friends later, yeah, I yelled at them. I did that. That does nothing. That does nothing for anybody. And it doesn't even do anything positive for you. I tell my daughter all the time not even to like jokingly call herself stupid. because I was like, you'll hear yourself say you're stupid, and you'll get more comfortable with the idea that you're stupid. Then it's like don't even encourage that. Don't even feed into that. So if you're sitting there and you're yelling and you're angry at people you're not even having a conversation with, you're the one who lost that. You got worked up for nothing. You're sitting there, you spend the rest of the car ride, and you're just getting eat up inside, and then just builds you up with more poison that you're going to want to go lash out at somebody else later. And that's not the right answer for anything anywhere,
Yeah.
Yeah. I stay really calm even in physical altercations where like this is going to happen. This guy is going to want to throw down with me. I stay really calm. You'll eventually see some part of me where all my adrenaline's getting focused, and I'll get like a twitchy leg. But I can, if by staying calm, a lot of times I can prevent it from going physical. And then if it does get to that part, then he spent 5 minutes or however long while I've tried to calm him down, where he's worked up, he's amped up and everything, and I've done nothing. So like it's just for me, like I think that's a better strategy anyways, because then he's 5 minutes into a fight, by the time we go down to it, and like I'm just ready to go. And hopefully that ends it fast, because I don't want to harm somebody beyond what's necessary to end them from harming me or others.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means breaking something, but that's still better than letting them go. What's the word?
Postal
is a pretty good one. I was thinking Tasmanian devil.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, we don't view the other side as individuals. And we even make jokes nowadays, and I do too, because they're funny, about how there's just NPCs out there. You only have like a three option dialogue option. When you're talking to them, you can't really get too far. But we have to remember that even if we can't get far in a conversation, those are people out there who are mothers, daughters, fathers, sons, brothers, other service members. Like, of course, there's not as much as that, but I've met military guys who don't believe in a lot of extreme gun freedoms, as they put it.
Oh yeah, no, I served with people that would have been willing to confiscate guns.
Well, and we get asked all the time that whenever the State Defense Force comes up, it's like, oh, so you're going to be the guys who come take our guns when things happen. It's like, I don't think you can get a voluntary group to say like, yeah, sure, I'll go to people's houses. And take their guns. Like, no, we're not the group for that. That's not going to happen. That's going to be under somebody's orders, and that's going to be a layer of guns at people's heads to get people to go do that.
Yeah.
If that ever happens, I hope it never comes to that. And I think we live in a good state that even if they did push it on a federal level, we'd be a little buffered from it, a little removed.
Yeah.
But
that's the whole point, is stopping it before it ever gets there.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this is so, we were only out there for 2 hours or something.
Yeah.
And two and a half hours. You ended up being out there a little longer.
I was out there for another hour on the other side.
And just in that short amount of time, in the grand scheme, that's a very short amount of time. On a Saturday, like most people have the time to go do something like that on a Saturday,
Yeah.
We gained a lot of ground and made a lot of progress, and, had very reasonable conversation. And I think they, some of them had very good points. I think they are a little misunderstood on where they're coming from, but what they're trying to do as a whole, we could all agree with. They're doing what they know is best, to all they know, to save kids. And there are a lot of them were teachers, so they came from that world.
Remarkable number of them were teachers.
Yeah, it's like, I think literally every person I talked to said, well, I was a teacher for 30 years, or I was a teacher for 42 years, or, well, I worked in the school district for 18 years. It was like always something like that. I was like, oh, cool, and again, that shows that perspective of why going back to like, why is the school shooting the catalyst for you to come out and speak out against guns?
Yeah.
And it's because that's their context, that's their perspective. So, and I appreciated them telling me that, because then it helped me understand. And then there was times I brought up my military background, because that gave me the context necessary to talk about things like the age. They kept bringing up 18 to 21, and it's like, so you're okay with, adults being able to join the military and get sent to a foreign country and be told to kill people in the name of their government at 18, but you don't want them to be able to defend themselves in their own house, So it's kind of again, that's context and perspective. So, but overall, I think the conversations were really good. We kept it really civil. I didn't experience any negative moments. I had one person get a little heated and start kind of finger pointing in my face a little bit, but we just kind of redirected it and went well. And then you had some kind of negative situations at that other group. Yeah, there was 2 different rallies going on. There was the March for Our Lives and then the Our Voices. I think
so. Yeah.
Which was, that whole thing was interesting too, because the couple I was talking to, the moral superior and her lesser superior husband. That's mean to say, but no, I was talking to her, and then her husband was there, and he was I get the vibe from him that he was like, yes, dear, I'll go to the rally with you. Like, it was kind of from that perspective, but they were both very nice though, and had great conversations with both. He made some good points, and he actually agreed quite a bit with some of the things I was bringing up. He's like, yeah, I would agree with that. People were wildly open to the idea of having armed security in schools.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that. But that gentleman actually brought up, he said, hey, I just want to let you know, we actually kind of co-organized with another group that wants to rally too. And, we didn't know what to expect when you guys walked up, so we weren't sure how this was going to go.
Yeah.
But, it's gone well. I really like what you guys are doing. I would encourage you to go over there. They started at 1 and they're going to protest till 3. We started at 12. We're going to protest till 2. So they actually organized strategically to avoid confrontation. And he basically admitted that to me and said, we kind of did this, and one of the ladies that helped organize it was like, we weren't sure what kind of confrontation we'd be met with, so we kind of planned it accordingly to avoid it and kind of have 2 different fronts. But they openly were like, but go over there, you should go over there and talk to them. So that was cool. That was cool that it got to the point where they were like, hey, go infiltrate our other organization in a way, but not infiltrate, but they're like, yeah, go over there. These conversations have been good.
I wonder if that's like, I want to know that whole thing, because it was obviously a different group of people. The people for the March for Our Lives were much more willing to have a conversation. So I want to know how there's 2 separate groups. What focus did they have in this group? These people were far more hostile than the people from March for Our Lives. So I want to know like how those targeted algorithms, how these people get exposed to these groups, how they get involved in these groups, why this one was more, put up more of a barrier about the conversation. They didn't want to continue. But I wonder about the same thing too, because it's like what keeps somebody from, what makes somebody do libertarian or Republican or like a neo-Nazi. Like it's like what little things push them in those directions.
Yeah,
but that's a whole other thing. I'll have to interview all of them and ask them what they ate for breakfast, and work their way backwards.
Well, I think we nailed down on a lot of it. I think it's that constant reaffirmation of like chasing only those ideas they believe in, and like going deper down the rabbit hole into that echo chamber. I think
and then social media has
that's how you get radicalized.
Social media has a huge like effect on that too, because like we all know. I mean, we follow probably all like close to the same kind of pages, like gun pages and things like that. So we're constantly seeing the same information, just getting regurgitated, which isn't a bad thing, because it's a good way to have talking points. It's a good way to learn within the industry itself. And but I mean, it's the same for them. They follow certain things that's going to be, it's constantly getting hounded. Where it's just like it's reinforcing the fact that they're right, and that we're right. And I think you have to look in other areas. That's why, like, I don't remember which podcast it was talking about, the social media platform that Trump was going to build, and it's like, I don't know, I don't necessarily know if that's like the best thing to do. Like, I think Instagram's a good thing, because it still does get seen occasionally. Like some of our posts still get seen by people that may not agree with us, but if they were to sit down and actually like read through it, it's like, okay, I can kind of get behind that,
the social media wars is where we're heading, with everything now, with Elon Musk trying to buy Twitter. And I think that's, I've said before, I think it's one of the best things he's done with his money. It's like, it's like more than like, electric cars, more than going to Mars, more than like,
But he's one of those guys that isn't very committed one way or the other,
And that's why I think it's great. Because he's not going to, all he wants to do is stop people from banning people. And he wants to remove bots. He wants to,
Yep.
make the voices heard actual voices and not echo chamber stuff, not reverberation or things bouncing off the walls, and
Yep.
everybody just pat themselves on the back for sharing the same thing over and over again. He's been an interesting person to follow, because I started following his stuff. Like a lot of these people I started following, I was trying to get out of my echo chamber, so I started following Tim Pool before the 2020 election, and he still now calls himself like a leftist. He agrees with a lot of those politics, but I got to see him slowly got to a part where he went and bought a gun, and he started shooting, and he slowly got to a part where he started he moved out of the city and moved into he calls it a compound, like out in a rural area, because it was safer. And then eventually it was like a few weeks before the election, he goes like, F it, I'm voting for Trump, because he aligns more with my leftist views. And so it's like every time I get, and that's what happened with Elon Musk too. Like I started following a lot of his stuff, and he's he calls himself a leftist and everything. And then now here he is saying he's going to vote for DeSantis, and he's posting memes of his face on a surfer inside of a red wave. Like it's interesting. It's like I have to go real far out of my echo chamber now to hear different viewpoints, and then those become so hard to swallow.
Digest.
Yeah, there was a podcast I found, and this was like I was like I have to really dive to the other side to find a different viewpoint. So I found a podcast called Eat the Rich. I couldn't finish an episode. Like it was hard. They were like laughing at billionaires who've died, because their whole concept is like if you're a billionaire, obviously you're like just a horrible person. And there was no actual arguments of morality based on morality. They even acknowledged in it that guy had donated more money to charities than like most of them had ever made in their life.
Yeah.
But instead of acknowledging that guy's done good, they're just like, well, he's in this group, we hate this group. And that's what I'm saying. Like we get so focused on your side, you can't even see the other side anymore. You just know that they're flinging poop into your little trench, so you're flinging poop back. Yeah. And we just get dug in too much.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think I think kind of as we wrap up, I think it's been a really good conversation. Again, we ended up talking about a lot of our beliefs and kind of our side of it, but ultimately the whole point was just get involved, be involved. Local politics is important. And be willing to go out.
We've pushed local politics in the past. I think that that's an incredibly important part. I think that's a less time-consuming part that's easy to do, that anyone should be out there doing. Regardless of your views, you should be reaching out to your local politicians, because ultimately that's your room. That's what you need to be cleaning. And then you can expand from there, because you were just mentioning, the state of Alaska is going to be, if they ever do, enforce firearms getting taken away, the state of Alaska is going to be a little bit shielded from that. Yeah. And I would hope that there's more states that are that way as well. So you see Texas and Tennessee, some of these more like states that are, Texas always talks about like, we're just going to become our own country again, And so they're kind of in the same boat as us, I think, and that's why you have so many people moving in there, like Joe Rogan and people like that.
Texas Texas is like one of the world's, if they broke away from the United States would go down a few points in world economy, and Texas would actually be higher than a good fistful of countries.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yeah. But and I think where you get that protective cushion is from your local politics. If you can make a big enough wave in your local politics to where it becomes state politics, then you will get that shielding from the federal government. Ultimately, that's kind of what I think our country was designed to be ran like, and it was. But so I guess I don't really know where I was going with that, but I think I got there.
There's I don't want to get, this is a whole other topic too, but there's so many people that are like, they'll go in, they'll buy cases of ammo or whatever, these people don't even usually go to gun shops. I see these people around, they buy guns from like garage sales or whatever,
Yeah.
But those people are like, we're getting close to the time, this is gonna be it. Like, we need to stand up and do something. You guys talked about it during your your political episode too. I think about that. And so many people are like ready for that.
Yeah.
But they're not doing anything now.
Yeah, there's no it's going to be reactive, not proactive.
Yeah.
And you got to have proactive measures. Oh, and that's where I was getting at. So obviously you got to do the politician stuff, but you also got to talk to people, your peers about different views, regardless of their views.
Yeah.
We got to talk about it because, I mean, even in that short 2.5 hour period that you guys were out there, you guys had people changing their signs out there. So obviously there was already a shift where they're like, oh shoot, I guess we needed to research that better.
Yeah.
And that's just them trusting your opinion. I mean, yeah, they can go research it and actually realize, yeah, that's actually factual what you guys told them, but they would have never, if they would have just stayed in their echo chamber, they would have never seen that. And vice versa as well. You have to talk the other side. And I think, you were saying you have to kind of go far out in order to find, different sources. And I think that's because the way
that's by design.
Well, yeah.
It's by design. And it's also like, I think it's their current country right now. Like a lot of people are like, oh shoot, this is pretty bad right now.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are kind of like, even like, like Elon Musk, he's saying, yeah, I might actually vote for a Republican for the first time, like because people are realizing like, oh man, it's kind of tough times right now. Our gas prices are ridiculous. Everything's going up in cost, and you can't find diapers or not diapers that we can't buy baby formula.
Yeah. Oh, diapers was a thing too.
Yeah, diapers was a thing for a second.
The food crisis stuff that we're like teetering on.
We're just on the verge of it.
Yeah, do you hear about the cattle?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
There's so many weird things happening, and I don't want to have my aluminum foil hat mess up my nice top hat that I have here.
Let's get the tinfoil hats out.
Yeah, but it's
remember to check out Infowars.com
and buy Ready Wise food
after you get your Viagra.
Yeah. It's definitely getting to the part now where I was looking at stuff. I was like, after 2020 and the ammo shortage, like, oh, I definitely want to, increase the amount of ammo I keep on stock. But now looking at everything that's happening now, I'm like, well, I was like, do I have enough beans? And I've always said, bullets, beans, and bandages. I can't remember who said that originally. It was like, that's what militaries run on. Like, if you can't make holes, patch holes, and feed bellies, you can't march on.
Yeah.
And so those are always the things I think, like, we've talked about before, almost nobody really gets serious about medical supplies at all. Like first aid, I've been in houses with no first aid kits.
Yeah.
And then me, I've even messed up, like knowing this. I was at the dog park. A dog bit me while I was trying to get him to not bite my dog, which is fine. Dogs bite. I don't freak out about that. But I went to go get into my kit. I'm like, well, I got tourniquets, but I'm not. Like, I was like, I got like,
you don't get the boo-boo kits.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I had this. I was like, it's actively bleeding, but not like enough to do anything like this for it. So I call my ex-wife, and we're still like super close. I was like, hey, you got your medical kit? She's like, yeah. I was like, if I head over there, can we patch me up a little bit? She goes, no problem. I was like, when will you be here? I'm like, 3 minutes. She's like, perfect. And then I hang up the phone. And this is just the type of person she is and how ready she is for stuff. I show up to the house, and she has like a cot out, and it's like clean towels on it, and she has like a bottle of rubbing alcohol or something, and like hand towels. Like, she had no clue what my injury was, but she was ready for it.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, you just need a Band-Aid. She's like,
yeah.
Like, in like 3 minutes, she was like full on trauma nurse ready.
Yeah.
And just assumed I guess I just put off that vibe that like if I'm injured, I'm shot. And obviously, like, my phone call was like, yeah, I'm hurt a little bit, I just
I get that.
And I probably would be.
I was gonna say, think back to the trauma response training, man. Just what do you need? Just paper towel and direct pressure.
Yeah.
Stop that bleed. No, but yeah. Well, I think we kind of need to start wrapping up. I'm sure. I'm getting texted. People are like, "Are you going to be open today?"
Yeah, no, I've actually I have people messaging me with questions for you guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So somebody wants to know when they can use your range, and then Hyatt wants to know where his holsters are.
Oh, okay. Well, he doesn't get to find out on the podcast, or maybe I should be like, yeah, tune in next Wednesday when this podcast launches.
Yeah, that's the
to
way
hear
to do
back. Yeah. So I'm not answering either of those questions. No, the range is coming. The range. Hopefully, we're just waiting on insurance stuff right now. Of course, insurance companies like to have their ducks in a row. So hopefully we get that all ironed out.
I'm thrilled. I always want more of those things in the area. I got a thing. I'm not gonna bring it up now. I'll just bring up that I know it and then I'll hint it. But I got a thing that we're working on that's in that category, but not. And I'm pretty excited about that. It's more of it'd be aimed more for some of the FEMA training stuff courses, which I'm getting more and more into doing that, especially after the whole sewer thing and how I felt the state doesn't have enough response for this, and there's not enough people trained in these things. Again, I'm getting sidetracked.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, keep us updated.
But there won't be any pew pew there. I mean, there'll be pew pew, but there won't be like actively pew pew.
Yeah, FEMA camps and pew pew.
Yeah,
might not go well.
Not a.
Yeah. Well, just kind of as we wrap up, again, we gotta go back to the day lives. Michael's got to get back to selling ammo at Soldotna Ammo and taking care of people. Which, if you haven't been over to that store, go check it out. I think it's one of the. It's probably the gun store for the peninsula.
Whoa. You're leaving out Three Bears, okay? Three Bears, you can get 9mm and ramen noodles same trip. I keep trying to get Hyatt to get ramen noodles so we can, like, if we had ramen noodles, it'd be the best.
It's a game changer. Yeah. Dude, you should. It's got to be easy to get you can find a ramen noodle wholesaler, I'm pretty sure. Honestly, you could probably just buy it from Three Bears and then sell it for a markup, and people would still buy it because it's convenient.
Yeah, we probably could.
I really need ramen noodles. Oh, sweet, yeah.
Actually, we should be able to sell it for the same price after tax.
But yeah, definitely be willing to have conversations with people. Get out of your comfort zone a little bit. Go to these things. If you see these things start happening, show up. Just have simple conversations. Try to have civil discourse. Hopefully we kind of made that point clear. We're very passionate about the community side of it. This is a community thing, and if every community took responsibility for their own community, I think our nation would be better as a whole. Some things I wanted to end with, since we are kind of on a political topic, are some things that just got passed, House bills that just got passed. So you have HR 2377, so 2377, and then there is also HR 7910 or 7910. Both of those, so 7910 is Protecting Our Kids Act, and then the 2377 is the Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act. So the Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act is basically a federal sweeping red flag law, and then the other one has a full blanketing of all kinds of different, regulations like magazine bans, AR-15, assault, using air quotes, assault rifle bans. Yeah. So again, that's HR 7910 and then HR 2377. So call your representatives, call your senators. This is moving. They've passed the House, so they're moving on to the Senate now. So it's really important to call your senators about this and make your thoughts known, regardless of what your thoughts are. Read up on them, understand them, start getting involved. Again, starts at the local level and on up. So that's a huge part of this. Pay attention to what your community's doing and stay on top of it. You got anything else, Michael?
No, but definitely community. We just got to reach out there more. We got to have these conversations in our families, in our churches, in our coffee shops, and then get out there and just calmly try to talk to other members of our community and just open that up for discussion. Well, thanks for joining us, man. I appreciate it. Always fun. Really good conversation. We'll have to have you back on if you want to come back on sometime. Yeah, when are we going to do the Star Wars versus Star Trek episode? Ooh, that would be a good episode. I got a lot to say about both of those. Yeah. Well, what is an Andorian? Because I think the Ewoks, they're Andorians, right? They're from the moon of Andor. Yeah. But Andorians in Star Trek are blue guys with antennas. Oh. So who stole who from what? One was in a galaxy far, far away a long, long time ago, so they probably had it first. Star Trek's set in the future. So there's got to be, everything usually comes full circle, so they're probably meeting on opposite ends of the spectrum. They probably are, yeah. And I want to know where Jesus falls in with that, because they celebrated Christmas in a galaxy far, far away before Jesus died. They didn't call it Christmas, though, but that holiday special was the worst thing that ever happened to Star Wars. Yeah. So, thanks for tuning in, and tune in next time for Star Wars versus Star Trek.